Seeing that his safety was guaranteed, Prince Yu let out a long breath and looked at him with a sinister smile. How funny. Not only did you not escape, but you also walked into a trap. Tell me, what benefits did Prince Yen give you to protect him? Jian Wushuang did not say anything. Apparently, he was too lazy to reply. Prince Yu seemed to feel that he was being looked down upon, so he was a little angry. However, he quickly calmed down. No matter what Prince Yen has given you, I will give you more. As long as you stay by my side. How about it? Prince Yen is definitely not a good person. He can even kill his own brother. Think about it, if you follow him, will you have a good ending? Instead of following him, why don't you follow me? I promise you that I'll give you whatever you want. Prince Yu said slowly with a proud look in his eyes. In the next moment, what responded to him was an extremely sharp sword intent. He was shocked and hurriedly changed his body, but he was still a step too late. The incomparably sharp sword intent directly left a deep wound on his cheek. The divine blood kept dripping, staining his golden armor. Damned thing! You actually dare to hurt me? Prince Yu was extremely furious. He allowed the blood on his face to drip as he raised his sword. All Yen Immortals! Kill him at all costs! The overwhelming Yen Immortal pressed down. Vast and mighty Yen power surged down. Jian Wushuang stood still and used his hand to guide the sword. He tried to release the Wushuang sword Dao again despite the exhaustion of his Yen power. Wushuang sword Dao, Star River Lake Ocean sword intent. Second move. River. The celestial river of his sword Dao that came out of nowhere shattered the void and surged out from every crack. Then, it gathered into a line and crazily pounced on every Yen Immortal. When all the Yen Immortals saw this scene, they were all shocked. They could naturally feel the majestic power contained within this sword river. Those who had foresight retreated nearly 30,000 meters, but those who wanted to resist were crushed into pieces by the sword river. They didn't even make a sound. Under this sword, another 20 or so Yen Immortals died. In just these few exchanges, the number of Yen Immortals that Prince Yu brought with him was less than 50. Cold sweat poured out from his temples. He finally understood why the Yen Immortal he had sent over had disappeared. Jian Wushuang was very strong. Although he was at the peak of the Yen Immortal stage, he could easily kill another Yen Immortal without using any strength. Could it be that he really killed Chang Duoling? Prince Yu's pupils shrank. He was starting to regret coming to this mess. Looking at the river of sword Dao that was still erupting, more and more Yen Immortals died. Prince Yu's expression was uncertain, and finally, his valiant face showed some ruthlessness. Then he reached out and touched his waist. A bronze bell the size of a wine cup appeared in his hand. With the appearance of the bronze bell, the Yen power in the surrounding void quieted down, showing a strange dark green color. Around the bronze bell, dark green crystals were condensing, as if they were alive. Looking at the bell that was exposed in the air, Prince Yu felt a pang in his heart. Blue Feather Bell, for the last time, I hope you can kill all the enemies in front of me for me. He muttered to himself, then gritted his teeth and threw the bronze bell in his hand into the void. In the next moment, the bronze bell expanded with the wind and formed a terrifying cauldron that could cover thousands of heavenly regions in an instant. This scene was too shocking. With the appearance of the bell cauldron, it was as if the boundless void was encompassed by it. The appearance of this ancient-looking bell called Blue Feather Bell caused all the Yen Immortals to tremble. The already broken heavenly Tao could not withstand the pressure and shattered. Jian Wushuang, who was in the center, felt an unimaginable life and death crisis looming over him. He almost did not think twice and prepared to escape. However, the ancient bell was too vast. The heavenly region it covered was almost unimaginable, so Jian Wushuang had no chance of escaping. He was ready to escape at all costs, but he felt that the Yen power around him had turned into a puddle of stagnant water, trapping him in it and making him unable to move. Cold sweat dripped from Jian Wushuang's temples. He could feel the aura that was restraining him. It was the heavenly Tao. It was a very ancient heavenly Tao that did not belong to this era. It was an extremely old and terrifying law. Jian Wushuang had no way to deal with the blue feather bell that carried the ancient heavenly Tao. He was completely restricted and could not even blink. This was a huge restriction. Even Di Qing at his peak would not be able to escape from the pressure of this bell. Moreover, the blue feather bell seemed to have its own consciousness. After binding Jian Wushuang, it rapidly shrank. From its original unparalleled distance, it instantly formed a huge bell that was thousands of miles long. In the bell, Jian Wushuang was bound by the dark blue power of heavenly Tao and could not move at all. At this moment, all the Yen immortals were gathered outside the bell, looking into it solemnly. Then, Prince Yu slowly moved over, his handsome eyes full of hatred. His blue feather bell was a supreme immortal weapon from the ancient era. It was once a treasure in the hands of his imperial father, Zhen Wuyang. It had killed countless grand Yen immortals, and the heavenly Tao laws contained within were irresistible. In fact, even emperors would be at a disadvantage. However, this blue feather bell was already on the verge of destruction, and its lifespan was only this last time. As Prince Yu's strongest trump card, blue feather bell was used on Jian Wushuang. Damn thing, you wasted the last use of my blue feather bell. I swear that I will turn you into blood and consign you to eternal damnation, Prince Yu roared. As his voice fell, the blue feather bell rang, and countless magnificent lights bloomed from it, illuminating the boundless void. In the blue feather bell, Jian Wushuang's 7 orifices spurted out divine blood. He felt that his immortal bones were about to be shattered. The unimaginable ancient rules of the heavenly Tao contained unknown that could not be spoken of. Jian Wushuang was helpless. Am I going to die just like that? Divine blood gushed out from the corner of his mouth. He could not break free at all. The dark blue heavenly Tao laws were rapidly devouring everything about him. The undying and imperishable immortal body that was transformed from a super chaotic perfect life form was shattering rapidly. However, Jian Wushuang had no way to break free. This was the first time he was truly helpless. That kind of irresistible power was too overbearing. Prince Yu's ferocious face was reflected in his eyes. All the Yen immortals laughed. A guy who could kill a grand Yen immortal and make all the other Yen immortals bow their heads. At this moment, he was trapped and suffering, and he was heading towards his inevitable demise. There was nothing more pleasant than this. Prince Yu could not even be bothered to continue watching. This blue feather bell was so terrifying that even a 9 revolutions grand Yen immortal could not escape, let alone a puny little Yen immortal. The undying and imperishable immortal body was collapsing like a star, never to return. At that moment, Jian Wushuang's consciousness was already blurry under the encirclement of the dark blue heavenly Tao. His immortal body was inevitably on the path of decline. Even if he did not die, he would probably be silent for endless years. Jian Wushuang wanted to resist the heavenly Tao, but he found that it was useless. It was a suppression that completely surpassed his realm and was unimaginable. Even if he tried his best, he did not have the slightest chance of destroying the blue feather bell. Am I going to die just like that? But I'm unwilling. Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes, which were red. The divine blood flowing in his body was rapidly repairing his damaged, undying, and imperishable immortal body, as if it was resisting the heavenly Tao. Prince Yu's eyes narrowed. He saw that the figure was fighting against the heavenly Tao. How is this possible? He was greatly shocked. One had to know that even a 9 revolutions grand Yen immortal could be intimidated by this blue feather bell. But soon he relaxed again, and at the same time his heart palpitated. Because Jian Wushuang had only resisted for a moment before, he could no longer resist his decline. What made Prince Yu's heart palpitate was that a mere Yen immortal could actually contend against the blue feather bell. It was simply unimaginable. Just as Prince Yu was about to get to know Jian Wushuang in advance, 2 tottering figures came from the void in the distance. The leader was the young emperor. His luxurious clothes were already in tatters, and his exposed skin was covered in wounds. However, at this moment, his eyes were filled with the dignity of a prince. He glanced at Prince Yu and walked towards the rapidly shrinking blue feather bell. Prince Yu was overjoyed when he saw this. He had never thought that the young emperor would walk right into his trap, saving him the trouble of searching. "Your Highness, do you want us to capture them?" a Yen Immortal requested. Prince Yu waved his hand arrogantly. "I want to see why this trash came back. I'll take him down later." All the Yen Immortals agreed, all of them watching this scene with a smile that was not a smile. The slender palm covered in divine blood was stuck to the outer wall of the blue feather bell. Looking at Jian Wushuang, who was suffering in the bell, the young emperor gently knocked on the outer wall with his fingers. Wushuang, Wushuang. Covered in blood, Jian Wushuang, who was about to die, opened his eyes with difficulty. He looked at the figure outside the blue feather bell and sighed. "Listen to me." The Yupim emperor stuck to the blue feather bell and said in a clear voice, "Take out the golden jade ring I gave you earlier and open it." Jian Wushuang could hear his voice, but it was almost impossible for him to move a finger, let alone take out the golden jade ring. The young emperor outside the blue feather bell seemed to know his difficulties and began to be at a loss. Prince Yu, who was standing far away, sensed that something was wrong. He hurriedly ordered, "Quick! Let's catch Prince Yen together. Don't let him speak." All of the Yen Immortals hurriedly moved and caught the young emperor. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang, who was about to die, put his palm into his chest at the risk of his immortal body shattering. Even the ancient and unknown Tao could not help but waver. He took out the golden jade ring and a unique color appeared on Jian Wushuang's palm, which had turned into a skeleton. "Ah!" He roared and pushed the jade ring in the middle of the golden jade ring. In an instant, an even more ancient and unknown heavenly Tao aura burst out from it, transforming into billions of tassels that descended. The appearance of the aura made Jian Wushuang relax, and the dark blue heavenly Tao that bound him dissipated. Immediately after, a supreme true image in a white robe walked out of the golden jade ring. At this moment, all the ancient heavenly Tao in the blue feather bell prostrated on the ground and trembled. He was like an ordinary person without any power, but his eyes carried the dignity of a superior. All the Yen Immortals who saw this true shadow were scared out of their wits. They almost could not stand properly and hurriedly knelt in the void, their immortal bodies trembling. Even Jian Wushuang was shocked. He had never expected that the golden jade ring that the young emperor had given him contained Emperor Zhen Wuyang's true image. Moreover, this true shadow belonged to the true shadow of Emperor Zhen Wuyang at his peak, and it was filled with a domineering and disdainful aura. Prince Yu, who was already in a daze, had never thought that a puny little Yen Immortal would actually hold a true shadow of his imperial father. This was simply inconceivable and unimaginable. One had to know that even he did not have the true image of his imperial father. With the appearance of the true shadow of Emperor Wuyang at his peak, the blue feather bell began to wail. It could not withstand the pressure of the emperor at all. The middle-aged Jinwu Yang's true shadow had a faint doubt in his eyes. He looked at the barrier of the blue feather bell and waved his hand. The blue feather bell, which contained the supreme heavenly Tao, shattered directly. The residue scattered in the air and quickly disappeared. Then, Zhen Wuyang true shadow looked at Jian Wushuang, who was on the verge of death. A look of satisfaction and uncertainty flashed across his eyes. Finally, he said, "Are you Yenner?" Jian Wushuang, who did not even have the strength to speak, could not even shake his head. He could only stare at him. The true shadow of Zhen Wuyang laughed and said, "That's right. My son Yenner indeed has the bearing of an emperor. Although you're in such a sorry state, it's fine. With me here, no one can hurt you." Jian Wushuang was completely speechless. They had only met once, but Zhen Wuyang's true shadow had mistaken him for Prince Yen. Could it be that they didn't recognize each other? Just as Jian Wushuang's divine thoughts were in a daze, Zhen Wuyang, who was furious, looked at the Yen Immortals who were kneeling in the void. "A bunch of ants. How dare you hurt my Yenner?" Prince Yu fell to his knees in the air and exclaimed, "Imperial Father, it's me. I'm Yuer, your third son." The third? Zhen Wuyang's true shadow was confused. "I only have Yenner, right? Why is there a third one?" Prince Yu knew that this was a fatal matter. If he could not explain it clearly, he would never have the chance to leave this place. Therefore, he made a prompt decision. He cut his wrist and threw out the divine blood in his meridians. If Imperial Father doesn't believe me, just check my divine blood. Prince Yu's voice resounded in the void battleground. All the kneeling Yen immortals heaved a sigh of relief. As long as they could verify the identity of an imperial prince, they would definitely be safe. All the Yen immortals could tell that the true image of Emperor Zhen Wuyang had been sealed for too long, which was why he did not know of Prince Yu's identity. Looking at the colorful divine blood in the air, Zhen Wuyang's true shadow looked at Prince Yu with a serious expression. The corner of his eyebrows twitched. The wound on his wrist was a little big in his excitement just now, causing the divine blood to not flow out slowly but spurt out like a fountain. If this continued, he would probably be weak in a moment. Imperial Father will know once we investigate, Prince Yu said nervously and reached out his hand. Zhen Wuyang's true shadow no longer hesitated. He waved his hand and took out a drop of divine blood. A drop of colorful divine blood lay in the palm, condensed from an unknown aura that was above the heavenly Tao. Zhen Wuyang looked at the divine blood in his hand. The divine blood was like a swallow in his arms, jumping happily. In the blink of an eye, it entered the true shadow and nourished it. Taking back his palm, Zhen Wuyang took a deep breath and looked at Prince Yu with a much gentler gaze. You said that you are my third son? Prince Yu was overjoyed. He hurriedly cupped his hands and said, Father, I am your third son, Prince Yu. When Zhen Wuyang heard this, his gentle eyes suddenly turned sharp, like two heavenly Daos. He pressed down on Prince Yu until he could not get up. Then why are you trying to kill your eldest brother? Cold sweat instantly broke out again. But he quickly cupped his hands and made a bitter and hateful gesture as he said in a sad voice, Imperial Father, you might not know this, but although Prince Yen is the eldest brother, he has never done anything that an elder brother should do. He is extremely cruel to us 6 brothers. Fifth brother Prince Mo was killed by him. Poor fifth brother. His head was chopped off and his immortal source was shattered. Prince Yu stood up and said. His eyes were filled with tears, and he could not help but burst into tears. When Zhen Wuyang's true shadow heard this, he was so shocked that he could not help but clench his fists under his luxurious clothes. Then he muttered, I actually have 7 sons. Zheng'er actually gave birth to 7 sons for me. Prince Yu's mouth twitched. It seemed that Zhen Wuyang did not notice that he had been brewing so many emotions. Soon, Zhen Wuyang's true shadow came back to his senses and frowned. If what he said was true and the 5th son was killed by Prince Yen, then today's matter would be extremely troublesome. This was a true shadow left behind by Zhen Wuyang at his peak. He could not remain for too long and was even slowly dissipating. Soon, Zhen Wuyang looked at Jian Wushuang, who was kneeling in the void and covered in blood, and asked, Yenner, what he said is the truth. Did you send the Yen Immortal to kill my 5th son? He had been severely injured by the supreme heavenly Tao in the blue feather bell, so much so that Jian Wushuang was still unable to speak. When Prince Yu, who was far away, saw this scene, he hurriedly said, Imperial Father, you are mistaken. He is not Prince Yen. The one behind you is Prince Yen. Zhen Wuyang was shocked. He looked behind him and saw a handsome young man standing behind Jian Wushuang. As their eyes met, Zhen Wuyang quickly frowned. The young emperor bowed slowly. Yenner greets Imperial Father. He did not say anything else and directly stretched out his palm to check between the young emperor's brows. Soon, a hint of sadness and pain flashed in Zhen Wuyang's eyes. There was no way to hide the uniqueness of the young emperor's constitution. So, Yenner, your physique. Zhen Wuyang could not continue. He turned around and looked at Jian Wushuang, who had already recovered. Then, which son are you? Imperial Father, you're wrong. He's not an imperial prince. He's Prince Yan's heavenly official. Prince Yu hurriedly corrected him. When Zhen Wuyang heard that, he frowned and took out a drop of divine blood from Jian Wushuang's body. The divine blood was mysterious and ever-changing. It was a hazy color that even the Yen Immortal could not see its core. In Zhen Wuyang's palm, Jian Wushuang's divine blood was also jumping. It seemed to have some unknown familiarity and probing. However, it did not merge with Jin Wuyong's real shadow. Instead, it kept swimming. Why do I feel a strong sense of familiarity? Looking at the divine blood in his hand that seemed to be protected by some kind of aura. Jin Wuyong's true shadow could not help but try to remove the aura. However, he soon discovered to his surprise that he could not break the restriction on this drop of blood. Jin Wuyong's gaze turned solemn. He looked at Jian Wushuang and asked again, "Are you really not my imperial son? Why do I feel a familiar feeling from you?" Jian Wushuang was confused. It had only been a few decades since he came to the Great Yen domain. Prior to this, he had never interacted with the entire Great Sea region or the heavenly court of Jin Wuyong. To be able to feel a familiar feeling from him was no different from fantasy. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to deny it, the young emperor, who had not spoken for a long time, said, "Imperial father, he is indeed not your son." Hearing this, Jin Wuyong did not say anything else, but the confusion in his eyes deepened. Jian Wushuang's aura was too familiar to him. It was as if he could not cut off some kind of cognitive emotion. Prince Yu, who was standing on the opposite side, could not help but feel anxious when he saw this scene. Then, he gritted his teeth and cupped his hands again. "Imperial father, please help fifth brother take Prince Yan's immortal bone." The void was deathly silent. Only this sentence resounded. To a lesser imperial lord who was unable to cultivate and had no immortal roots, the act of taking away his immortal bones would completely strip him of his immortal path. Once the immortal bone was stripped off, he would die in an extremely short period of time, and there was no way to reverse it. Prince Yu wanted the young emperor to die. After hearing this sentence, various complicated emotions flowed in Jin Wuyong's eyes. In the end, he looked at the young emperor. Have you done that kind of thing?" The young emperor smiled coldly, his gaze extremely calm. "Imperial father, my personality has never changed since I was young. Whether you believe it or not, I would never do such a thing. Even if my immortal body is incomplete and I can't cultivate, I still don't acknowledge my brothers, so I naturally won't argue with them." When the young emperor said this, there was only a cold smile left in his eyes. And only the person who did such a thing knows in his heart. Prince Yu felt his ears burning. He gritted his teeth and said, "He's still trying to argue. Imperial father, don't listen to his one-sided story. If my words are one-sided, then so are yours. Of course, if you have evidence, why don't you bring it up and testify on the spot?" The young emperor said coldly, not giving in. Prince Yu gritted his teeth after hearing that. He could not produce any evidence. Prince Mo died too quickly. The mysterious person who killed him did not leave any evidence at the scene. Even if there was evidence left behind, it would no longer exist with the complete destruction of the Northern Heaven Celestial Prefecture. In this frozen atmosphere, Jin Wuyong looked at Prince Yu and waved his hand. "Let's not discuss this anymore. You can leave with your Yen Immortal." Prince Yu was taken aback. He hurriedly said, "Imperial father, why?" Before he could finish his sentence, Jin Wuyong suddenly released an unparalleled pressure that suppressed everything. Under this pressure, even the Yen Immortal could not stand still and almost died. All right, Imperial father, we'll leave now." Prince Yu, who was kneeling in the air, could not even lift his head. Jin Wuyong did not look at him anymore. He waved his palm and dispelled the pressure. Prince Yu heaved a sigh of relief, hiding his resentment in his heart. Then, he left the Void Battleground with less than 50 Yen Immortals. At this point, the entire Void Battleground finally calmed down. Jin Wuyong's true shadow was about to dissipate. Countless stars appeared behind him and then disappeared into the void. This true shadow that had been sealed in the ring by Jin Wuyong from an unknown era was about to dissipate. Yenner, the true shadow of Jin Wuyong, was filled with guilt and reluctance. He reached out his hand to touch the young emperor's cheek. However, the young emperor subconsciously dodged his palm and lowered his head. A hint of loneliness flashed in Jin Wuyong's eyes, but he immediately regained his calm. In the end, his emperor body slowly dissipated. As he dissipated, he suddenly said, Yener, I've let you down. The young emperor raised his head. His eyes were filled with confusion, but he could not find the answer in the end. As Jin Wuyong's true shadow completely disappeared, the void battleground became deathly silent. Jian Wushuang, who had recovered a little, let out a long sigh. If it weren't for the appearance of Zhen Wuyong's true shadow, he would have been turned into blood in the blue feather bell. The young emperor stood rooted to the ground, seemingly recalling what had just happened. Humph! Prince Yen, do you think you can escape? At this moment, a furious roar came from the depths of the void. Then the chaotic void was lit up. The group of Yen immortals led by Prince Yu did not leave but returned. At this moment, his eyes were filled with anger, as if he wanted to swallow the young emperor alive. Jian Wushuang thought to himself, "This is bad." He did not expect Prince Yu to be so bold as to return. At this moment, he had not even recovered half of his strength. It would be difficult for him to deal with these dozens of Yen immortals and Prince Yu, who had many tricks up his sleeve. If Prince Yu took out another ancient immortal weapon, he would be helpless. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang looked at the young emperor and said, "You'd better leave quickly. I think this place can't hold on any longer." When the young emperor heard this, he smiled and said, "The reason why I came back was to save you. Now that you're chasing me away, that's too unreasonable. Listen to me, you can't stay here any longer. Even if Prince Yu catches me, he won't dare to do anything to me. You want to leave?" Prince Yu grinned hideously and pointed at Jian Wushuang. "None of you can leave here alive today, except for Prince Yen. Kill the rest." "Yes." All of the Yen immortals responded and released their energy at the same time, surrounding them from all directions. "Looks like I can't leave even if I want to." Jian Wushuang sighed and an invisible sword appeared in his palm. Seeing this sword, all the Yen immortals were terrified. They had all escaped from Jian Wushuang's sword, so they naturally did not dare to underestimate him. Under his sword, the Yen immortals all trembled. This was the first time that each of the Yen immortals had faced such a terrifying sword principle. Before this, they had never seen an opponent who could use the sword principle so terrifyingly. However, they had orders, so they could only brace themselves and accept the challenge. With the combined power of 50 Yen immortals, layers of majestic barriers surrounded Jian Wushuang and the young emperor. Jian Wushuang, who had yet to recover, was afraid that he would not be able to fight again. He estimated that he could only release 2 sword intents at most before he would be exhausted. When the barrier around him was thick enough, the aura around Jian Wushuang, who was originally calm, suddenly changed. He was like a true sword that had been completely unsheathed. Tens of thousands of sword intents surrounded him, filled with a murderous aura. The next moment, he slashed down with the invisible sword in his hand. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. First move. Star. As the first sword move of the entire Peerless Sword Dao, Star was the thickest sword move, filled with an awe-inspiring indomitable will. However, this ordinary slash shattered the countless amount of Yen power. Boundless sword intent surged and poured out crazily. Nearly 100 pillars of light exploded. Under this sword strike, even the void trembled. The barrier that contained the power of 50 Yen immortal experts was directly cut open and then collapsed uncontrollably. Seeing this, Prince Yu turned pale with fright. "Hurry up and block him. If anyone dares to let him go today, I'll skin you alive." All the Yen immortals were terrified, but they still braced themselves and went forward. At this moment, each of them completely released their Yen power, trying to trap Jian Wushuang and the others. They had done it. Jian Wushuang had used up all his energy in this attack. He was unable to escape from the attack. The endless sword intent dissipated. Looking at Jian Wushuang, the young emperor, and the thin purple robe who were surrounded by the power, Prince Yu could not help but smile. The destruction of the 6 heavens and Prince Yan's capture was the ultimate goal of this battle. However, before the smile on Prince Yu's face disappeared, he saw several figures rushing over from the front. They were so fast that they arrived in the blink of an eye. "Not good. There's a change." His eyelids twitched. Only then did he see that all of them were Yen immortals. A total of 7 figures with strong Yen power around their bodies slowly walked toward Prince Yu, like the sharpest sword intense. He subconsciously retreated and gritted his teeth. Led by Di Qing, 7 Yen immortals descended. Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, Zhao Ting, Wei Liujia, Feng Shan, all of them were present. "My lord, Feng Shan is late." Feng Shan shouted angrily, and his chest was bare. He flew toward Jian Wushuang like a real divine mountain. Following that, Chun Qing and Chun Qiu advanced one after another with an indomitable momentum. Now they had all recovered to their peak. Di Qing had already recovered from the heavy injuries he had suffered previously to his peak condition. The 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal was still extremely terrifying. Even though Di Qing had not recovered, he had still easily outpowered many enemies. They were fighting to save Jian Wushuang. Boom! Feng Shan, who was like a raging bull, directly tore a crack in the energy diffraction barrier with all his strength and then desperately crawled inside. "Why are you guys here?" Jian Wushuang was both surprised and delighted. "Of course we have to come. Otherwise, my lord will be in danger." Feng Shan's face turned red. He tried his best to block the crack and prevent it from closing again. "I can't hold on much longer. Let's go quickly." Chun Qing followed closely behind. He drew the true sword at his waist and placed it horizontally in the middle of the crack. Then he said, "Brother Jian, young emperor, leave quickly." Jian Wushuang nodded heavily. Without any hesitation, he pulled the young emperor and the thin purple-robed man and rushed out of the crack. "Damn it! Kill them all!" Prince Yu was utterly exasperated. He had damaged the blue feather bell and sacrificed so many Yen immortals. Yet he was still unable to capture Prince Yen. He could no longer remain calm. The remaining 40-plus Yen immortals charged forward once again. They didn't know that this unfair battle had already been reversed. There seemed to be only 7 ordinary Yen immortals, but excluding Di Qing, the remaining 6 were enough to make them suffer. Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, and the others all had 2 or 3 emperor-grade pills stuffed into their mouths. Once they were injured, they could swallow them directly and instantly recover half of their strength. After Chun Qing and Feng Shan brought him out, Chun Qiu sent over a large number of pills, all of which were pills that could heal serious injuries. Jian Wushuang quickly stuffed a few pills into young emperor and the thin purple-robed man's mouth. Nearly 10 emperor-grade pills entered his mouth and directly transformed into violent energy that surged into his limbs and bones. Caught off guard, Jian Wushuang's immortal body almost exploded. All his injuries were healed and he was back to his peak condition. At this moment, Jian Wushuang felt that the meridians in his immortal body were about to explode and needed to be vented. His eyes were bloodshot, and the Shin glyphs around his body had almost doubled in size. He then looked at Prince Yu in the distance. When their eyes met, Prince Yu felt a great sense of danger that made him tremble. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang rushed straight at him. The void collapsed, and a scarlet streak of light cut through the void. Jian Wushuang could not hold back the restlessness in his immortal body. He probably did not even know that he had unknowingly activated the Slaughter Dao. "Stop him!" Prince Yu was shocked and quickly retreated. Nearly 10 Yen immortals arrived first and tried to stall Jian Wushuang with their own Yen power. However, he was no longer in his previous unrecovered state. At his peak, Jian Wushuang could already fight a 3 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, let alone them. A mantis trying to stop a chariot was overestimating its own strength. Jian Wushuang, who had mastered the Slaughter Dao, didn't even transform into an invisible sword. Instead, he directly threw a heavy punch. This punch was enough to destroy the entire heavenly region. The Scarlet Fist Force Gale smashed out. The first Yen Immortal who came forward did not even have time to make a sound before he was directly blasted into a bloody mist and disappeared. Furthermore, the force of the fist did not decrease. After crushing the first Yen Immortal, it smashed 6 more. Boom! 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 The blood mist was spreading. Out of the dozen or so Yen Immortals who had come forward to block, only 3 were left under this punch. Prince Yu was so shocked that he did not plan to stay here any longer. He turned around and flew toward the immortal array formation in the distance. Get lost! Jian Wushuang, whose mind had been slightly changed by the slaughter Dao, was furious. He chose to charge at the less than 30 evolved immortals in front of him. Boom! 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 Each punch was enough to destroy the immortal source of a Yen immortal. Jian Wushuang was like a demon god that was above the heavenly Dao, killing the Yen immortals one by one. All the Yen immortals were so vulnerable in front of him, they could not even defend themselves. Their immortal sources were smashed and they died miserably. In less than 10 breaths of time, only 7 out of the 30 were left. They were all terrified and did not dare to resist anymore. They directly fled into the wilderness. You want to leave? Jian Wushuang smiled coldly and raised his palm. Suddenly, thousands of scarlet light beams shot out in all directions like chains. The 7 Yen immortals who were fleeing towards the wilderness were caught in an instant and dragged in front of him. Lord, please let us go. We don't want to be enemies with you. It's all because of Third Prince. Before he could finish his sentence, the 7 Yen immortals were directly shredded into pieces by the scarlet chains. Jian Wushuang never showed mercy to his enemies. It was impossible for him to let them live. After killing all the Yen immortals, he flew toward Prince Yu, who was about to escape. The killing intent in his eyes intensified, and he had already listed this person as his target. Prince Yu let out a long breath as he got closer and closer to the immortal array formation. However, just as he was about to rush into the immortal array formation, a great sense of danger surged in his heart. He did not think and used all his strength to dodge to the side. Boom! The scarlet power covered the sky and directly destroyed the immortal array formation. Jian Wushuang walked over slowly with his eyes as dark as water. Cold sweat dripped down from his temples. Prince Yu stood rooted to the ground, trembling uncontrollably. Judging from his previous behavior, Jian Wushuang, who was extremely cold and stern, obviously did not intend to let him leave. He was very sure that Jian Wushuang would not be afraid of him because he was the third prince. Because of this, Prince Yu had fallen into despair. He had never thought that he would be so close to death one day. Prince Yu said in a trembling voice out of fear of death, No, you can't do anything. I'm the third imperial prince under the emperor. If you do anything to me, you'll definitely pay the price. As long as you let me go, I will completely forget everything that happened today. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold as he looked at him with a faint smile. As long as you don't kill me, I promise that I won't do anything harmful to you from now on. Prince Yu had completely abandoned the arrogance of an imperial prince and was almost begging. I am Prince Yan's third brother. He is my brother. He definitely won't let you touch me. As he said this, he even started to shamelessly call out the name of the young emperor. However, he did not know that Jian Wushuang did not belong to the branch of the young emperor. In fact, their relationship was equal. Wanting to use the young emperor to suppress him was simply a fool's talk. Prince Yu shouted the name of the young emperor at the top of his lungs. However, Jian Wushuang immediately cut off Prince Yu's entire left arm with his palm. Divine blood spurted out, and his immortal body was shattered. Prince Yu screamed and staggered backward while clutching his broken arm. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold, and he had no intention of letting him go. If it was not for the emperor's true shadow, the blue feather bell would have killed Jian Wushuang. It was also because of this that he had the intention to kill. If he let Prince Yu go, Jian Wushuang would be in a passive position in the future. Therefore, Prince Yu had to die. At this moment, he did not even consider the existence of Zhen Wuyang and the heavenly court. The palm that was surging with scarlet power fell again. Prince Yu's right leg was cut off, and divine blood spurted out. Without the support of one leg, Prince Yu sat in the chaotic void and looked at Jian Wushuang with a pale face. He could see the killing intent in Jian Wushuang's cold eyes. There was no room for redemption. Prince Yu was extremely regretful. He should never have thought of cleaning up the battlefield and capturing the young emperor alive. If he did not have such thoughts, he would not have ended up in this situation. Don't kill me. I don't want to die. I can give you anything you want. Prince Yu's face turned ashen. Imperial Emperor's Fate Energy. I'll use the Imperial Emperor's Fate Energy to exchange for my life. Is that okay? Jian Wushuang did not want to listen to him anymore. The killing intent in his hand was extremely dense and turned into a long and narrow blood blade. The next moment, he raised the blood blade in his hand and slashed down without hesitation. Prince Yu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets, his face ashen. However, the blood blade did not slash down. It seemed to have encountered some obstruction and hovered above his head. Jian Wushuang turned around and looked behind him. Di Qing had already arrived by his side and stopped him with a spell. Di Qing placed his palm on Jian Wushuang's shoulder and patted it gently. Then, he said in a low voice, "Leave it to me." As he spoke, he slowly walked to the trembling Prince Yu. Prince Yu felt as if he had been pardoned. "Save me! Save me! I can give you all of the Emperor's fate energy." What responded to him were thousands of extremely sharp golden feathers. Each golden feather was strong enough to break the heaven path and pierce through any super-heavenly region. Thousands of golden feathers pierced through his body and turned his immortal body into dust. Even his immortal source was crushed. The third prince under true martial Yang, Prince Yu, had died just like that. The void wailed as the fate that belonged to the prince returned to the universe and could no longer be collected. Seeing this scene, the young emperor's body trembled and he slowly took a few steps back. If it wasn't for the thin purple robe holding him back, he would have collapsed. Prince Yu died right in front of his eyes. All kinds of emotions were changing in his eyes, and he finally closed his eyes tightly. The magnificent and majestic 10-sided wings slowly moved behind Di Qing, illuminating the primal chaos void. Under a casual attack from a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, even a prince was easily destroyed. The insufferably arrogant Prince Yu had fallen. After putting away the slaughter Dao, Jian Wushuang regained his composure. He looked at Di Qing and asked slowly, "Why did you do that?" Putting away the 10 directional wings, Di Qing said calmly, "Because he is the prince of Zhen Wuyang. Once you kill him, you will definitely suffer Zhen Wuyang's revenge. Moreover, you will definitely not be able to survive his wrath." At this point, he paused and continued, "I'm different. Even if he attacks me, I have a way to protect myself." Jian Wushuang was moved. He understood that Di Qing was doing this to protect him. Then, he said solemnly, "Thank you. I owe you one. There's no need for thanks between us." Di Qing raised his eyebrows and smiled. "However, I'm afraid I'll have to leave for a period of time." Just as Jian Wushuang was about to ask him where he was going, an indescribable aura shrouded the entire void battleground. This aura was extremely majestic. Wherever this aura enveloped, time would stop flowing and it would be completely sealed. The shattered heavenly Tao was reconstructed, and the chaotic void was quickly repaired. Jian Wushuang, who could not move at all, widened his eyes and looked ahead in disbelief. Everything was going back in time. Then what kind of power could complete the backtracking? The fate and aura that had originally dissipated began to condense like stars. Soon, under the condensation of starlight, an extremely familiar figure appeared again. Prince Yu, whose immortal source had been destroyed by Di Qing, had been reborn. At the same time, the chaotic void was torn apart, and indescribably powerful figures appeared from the end of the void. They all carried light wheels of various colors on their backs, and within the light wheels, there was hope that the ancient heavenly Tao would circulate. Only 6 Revolution Grand Yen Immortals would condense light wheels, and they were all senior Grand Yen Immortals under Zhen Wuyang. Every one of them was 9 revolutions at the very least. Even the newly born heavenly Tao prostrated at their feet. At the very front of these Grand Elders was a figure with a tired expression and no aura. Although he was extremely ordinary, he made all the Grand Elders and Grand Yen Immortals behind him submit. All of the berserk energies, auras, and even the heavenly Tao in the void battleground were unable to get close to him. The Lord of the Heavenly Court, Emperor Zhen Wuyang, had arrived. Jian Wushuang felt that the divine blood in his meridians had frozen. In front of that aura, he could not even breathe. Arriving at the void battleground, Emperor Zhen Wuyang looked tired, but he still carried a supreme aura. Looking at the confused Prince Yu who had opened his eyes, his face turned ashen. "I, Imperial Father, I'm still alive?" Prince Yu, who had just recovered from his daze, was extremely excited when he saw the arrival of Zhen Wuyang. However, what awaited him was not a concerned question, but a powerful slap. The Emperor was furious and sent him flying 30,000 meters away. Prince Yu, who had just reconstructed his immortal body, was in his weakest state. Divine blood gushed out of his 7 orifices. He was almost killed by this slap. Then, Zhen Wuyang stretched out his hand and pulled him back to the front. Covering the divine blood spurting out of his nose, Prince Yu said timidly, "Imperial Father, why did you hit me?" Taking a deep breath, Zhen Wuyang pointed at the shattered void and said in a deep voice, "Did you do this?" When he heard this, he immediately became a little listless. "Yes, but it's not just me." When Zhen Wuyang heard that, he was so angry that he wanted to slap him a few more times, but he eventually retracted his palm. The magnificent and terrifying aura in the void battleground disappeared. Jian Wushuang and the others panted and retreated. The aura that Zhen Wuyang had sent down was too vast. Even Di Qing, who was a 9 revolutions grand evolution immortal, could not resist it, let alone them. Jian Wushuang was sweating profusely. If Zhen Wuyang were to kill him, he would not be able to escape. Then, Zhen Wuyang slowly swept his gaze across them. After pausing for a moment on Jian Wushuang and Di Qing, he quickly looked at the young emperor. "Yener, tell me what happened," he said in a deep voice. The entire void was shattered like this. It was definitely not as simple as a battle. When the young emperor heard this, he did not hesitate and immediately told Zhen Wuyang everything that had happened. This battle, which involved over 1,000 Yen immortals, was the largest battle that had taken place since Emperor Zhen Wuyang opened up the Grand Sea region. The powers involved were complicated, the immortal evolution realm was vast, they were all ancient and modern. As such, when the young emperor described such a tragic battle scene, Zhen Wuyang and the Grand Yen immortals behind him were all shocked. A Yen immortal was an absolute existence in normal heavenly regions. They had transcended the heavenly Tao and 99% of the shackles. Even in the great Yen domain they were at the peak. But now they had all perished in the void battleground. It was because of this inexplicable battle. When Zhen Wuyang and the Grand Yen immortals heard that the 2 factions were equal, they were truly shocked. With less than 200 Yen immortals, they resisted the attacks of close to 2,000 Yen immortals and 3 Grand Yen immortals, completely protecting the 6 heavens. How was this possible? A 1v20 situation? He could still protect the 6 heavens realm? In the end, the young emperor looked at Jian Wushuang and Di Qing and said, "If it weren't for their help, the 6 heavens realm would have been destroyed long ago. Even I would have died in this chaotic battle. So, he deserves to die." He pointed at Prince Yu, who was kneeling in front of Zhen Wuyang, and shouted angrily. Prince Yu immediately sat in the void and waved his hands. No, it's not just me. This has nothing to do with me." Zhen Wuyang took a deep breath, and the emperor light emitted from his body could not help but fluctuate. This was too shocking. In just a short period of time after he left the 6 heavens realm, such a tragic battle had erupted. If this battle was not stopped in any direction in the 6 heavens realm, it would be an extremely terrifying destruction. Fortunately, this battle had already completely subsided. Zhen Wuyang's eyes were very dark, as if he wanted to swallow Prince Yu alive. No, Imperial Father. This has nothing to do with me. This matter has nothing to do with me. He kept retreating, his eyes filled with fear. However, Zhen Wuyang did not hit him again. Instead, he said in a deep voice, "You alone are definitely unable to gather so many Yen immortals. Now tell me, who else is there besides you?" Prince Yu hesitated and struggled. He seemed to want to keep this secret. However, the struggle and hesitation in his heart only lasted for a moment before he said, replying to Imperial Father, "Its 2nd brother and 6th brother." Hearing this, Zhen Wuyang was furious. All right. The 3 of you have guts to mobilize so many Yen immortals to kill your brother. If you kill your brother now, will you kill me, the emperor, in the future? His expression was terrifyingly dark. Clearly, he was truly furious. Prince Yu was shaking all over. Imperial father, it's not what you think. There's a reason for all of this. Zhen Wuyang suppressed the anger in his heart and looked at him in disappointment. From now on, you are grounded for a Hua year. With the emperor's mantra, the heavenly Tao was established. Countless imperial emperors' heavenly Tao were born at this moment. Mysterious engravings flowed in the void, each representing the imperial emperor's heavenly Tao. The entire void was enveloped by the emperor's splendor as the imperial emperor's heavenly Tao descended. Prince Yu was terrified. To be grounded for a year was simply unimaginable. 1 year meant that even the heavenly region plane constructed by the heavenly Tao would be destroyed, turning into star fragments and disappearing into the boundless void. 1 year meant that a cultivator could grow to the terrifying level of the Yen Immortal stage. A Hua year represented an infinite amount of time. It was the transition point when the new heavenly Tao replaced the old heavenly Tao. Prince Yu was grounded for 1 Hua year, which was the most severe punishment. No, imperial father. Everything was because of Prince Zhou. Prince Zhou made me do this. I'm innocent. Prince Yu shouted in a daze. But the imperial emperor's heavenly Tao had already descended. It was like chains that instantly bound him. Then, the void collapsed, revealing an unknown space. The emperors will dragged Prince Yu inside and sealed him. The void was flattened, and the strange energy unique to the imperial emperor's heavenly Tao was slowly moving. In that unknown dimension, the third prince of the emperor, Prince Yu, was sealed for a year. The void was silent. All the grand elders shook their heads and sighed. Then they looked at Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. Soon, a grand Yen Immortal recognized Di Qing, who was beside Jian Wushuang. How could it be him? That ancestral golden crow? Didn't he die at that time? The group of grand elders and grand Yen Immortals began to whisper to each other. At this moment, Emperor Zhen Wuyang also noticed Di Qing. Tell me, why are you here? Unknowingly, the imperial emperor's prestige descended, suppressing all the Yen Immortals to the point that they were unable to hold on. Di Qing gritted his teeth. He was using all his strength to resist the emperor's pressure. At this moment, the young emperor stepped forward and stood in front of Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. He said loudly, "If it weren't for their all-out resistance, I'm afraid that the 6 heavens realm and I would have perished in the void. Father, you can ask me anything you want to ask. I will answer for them." Zhen Wuyang wanted to say something but stopped. He knew that this battle was too intense and involved too many forces. In this battle, the 6 heavens realm was the victim. Without Jian Wushuang, Di Qing, and the others, the 6 heavens realm would have been destroyed by the Yen Immortal army. Therefore, Zhen Wuyang did not make things difficult for Di Qing. The destruction of the 6 heavens realm was a premeditated war. If they did not investigate it thoroughly, it would probably leave behind a source of disaster. After pondering for a moment, Zhen Wuyang spoke again. "Which one of you killed Prince Yu?" Jian Wushuang's heart sank when he heard this. Just as Di Qing had said, Zhen Wuyang would get to the bottom of it. Just as the young emperor was about to speak, Jian Wushuang said calmly, "I killed him." All the grand elders and grand Yen Immortals turned their gazes to him, as if their eyes were filled with pity. Di Qing was slightly stunned. Then, he turned to look at Jian Wushuang with various emotions flashing in his eyes. Then, Zhen Wuyang said in a deep voice, "Then do you know what crime it is to kill a prince?" The emperor's will pressured him. He gritted his teeth and held on, not letting himself fall. "I only know that if I don't kill him, I will be in danger." The long sword was in the air and it broke through the emperor's pressure. The young emperor stood in front of Jian Wushuang and raised the long sword in his hand, pointing it at Zhen Wuyang. "Young emperor, put down your sword." All the grand elders and grand Yen Immortals stepped forward to pressure the young emperor. However, he was still unmoved. He raised the true sword in his hand and pointed the tip of the sword at Zhen Wuyang without taking a step back. "Do you dare to attack me?" Zhen Wuyang said in a deep voice. At this moment, the emperor's splendor shone to the extreme. under the emperor's splendor. Chun Qing and the others all grunted, and a wisp of divine blood involuntarily seeped out from the corner of their mouths. The already weak young emperor retreated a few steps, and divine blood flowed out of his ears and nose. However, he instantly stood in front of Jian Wushuang and raised his real sword, aiming at Jian Wuyang again. Then he said in a hoarse voice, "Why wouldn't I dare?" A hint of disappointment flashed in Jian Wuyang's eyes. Then he casually raised his hand and the heavenly Tao pressed down. The true sword in the young emperor's hand shattered into 100 pieces. His body was also suppressed by the emperor's heavenly Tao. "Let go of me, Jian Wuyang," he roared, but there was no way for him to break free from this restraint. Jian Wuyang did not mind the young emperor calling him by his name. Instead, he looked at Jian Wushuang. "Was it really you who killed the prince at this moment?" A lazy voice suddenly resounded in the void. Di Qing walked to the front of the group of Yen immortals. Hey, look at me. To be able to kill an imperial prince without any fear, in the entire Great Sea region, other than me, Di Qing. I'm afraid there's no other Yen immortal." After saying this, Di Qing resolutely spread out his 10 wings. In an instant, the magnificent Yen power belonging to a 9 revolutions grand Yen immortal spread out in the void. The magnificent 10-sided wings spread out, and Di Qing's ancestral bloodline also extended for tens of thousands of miles at this moment. Screech! The cry of the golden crow was extremely sacred and majestic. Di Qing was taking the initiative to fight the Jian Wuyang. Even though he was a 9 revolutions grand Yen immortal, he was not even worth mentioning when facing an emperor. Just a wisp of emperor fate energy was enough to easily kill any grand Yen immortal, including Di Qing. If one had to describe the distance between them, it would be like a speck of dust and the bright moon. It was even more incomparable. However, even with such a majestic and proud Di Qing, Jian Wuyang did not even have the slightest interest in fighting. He looked at Di Qing with interest. "Golden Crow, you never seem to be afraid of me?" Di Qing smiled and looked at Jian Wuyang. "To be honest, even after you became the emperor, I was never afraid. Even now, I'm not afraid. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to solve any problems. So I removed this unstable factor from my blood." "Are you really not afraid of me?" Jian Wuyang narrowed his eyes. Di Qing's eyes narrowed slightly. Of course. The atmosphere was deathly silent. This was the first time a grand Yen immortal dared to contradict an emperor. To those grand Yen immortals, this was an extremely strange scene. Jian Wuyang had been fighting and killing all his life. He had killed several emperors before developing the current Great Sea region. However, he was not in a hurry to make a move against this guy who could be easily crushed. As expected, your temperament is still the same as before. As a member of the Golden Crow ancestral bloodline, it is rumored that you have 9 true lives. This is probably why you dare to confront me. What if I destroy your 9 true lives right now? Emperor Jian Wuyang said slowly. Di Qing's heart tightened when he heard this. He did not expect Jian Wuyang to know about his hidden trump card. He only had 7 true lives left. If Jian Wuyang was determined to punish him, he would probably die today. Thinking of this, Di Qing gritted his teeth and did not say anything. As for Jian Wuyang, he did not seem to want to know Di Qing's answer. He extended his index finger and pointed at the void. In an instant, all of Di Qing's plans were shattered like a mirage. Di Qing's mouth was dripping with divine blood, and his eyes were wide open. Jian Wuyang looked at him and said in a deep voice, "Killing an imperial prince is a capital crime to you, but since you have other thoughts, I will spare your life. But I will immediately banish you to the endless sea for a year." As soon as the emperor's mantra was spoken, the heavenly Tao appeared. Layers of chains bound Di Qing. Di Qing's expression changed drastically when he heard the punishment. "1 Hua year? Are you planning to let me get lost in it?" However, he only left this sentence before his figure completely disappeared into the void. Jian Wushuang stood up to chase after him, but he could not catch up with him in the end. Exiled to the endless sea. These short words contained endless terror and coldness. Back then, Chong Duoling, who had single-handedly killed the 9 heavens, had been exiled to the endless sea. However, he had used some unknown method to escape, so he was extremely cautious with his words toward the endless sea. That unknown place was probably the true purgatory. Prince Yu was grounded for a Hua-year, and Di Qing was exiled to the endless sea for a Hua-year. Everything seemed to be just the beginning. Zhen Wuyang slowly swept his gaze across the remaining Yen immortals in the void battleground. Finally, his gaze stopped on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not avoid it either. Instead, he looked at him coldly. For some reason, when he met that pair of eyes, Zhen Wuyang felt a very familiar and strange feeling. At the same time, it felt like they were on equal footing. This made Zhen Wuyang feel shocked. Why would a mere Yen immortal give him such a feeling? An existence that did not even belong to the same realm had already made Zhen Wuyang wary at this moment. This kind of vigilance was unprecedented for Zhen Wuyang. Even in that ancient era, when the emperor had ruled over thousands of generations, there were very few existences that could make him feel threatened. This was simply absurd. Zhen Wuyang directly discarded the absurdity that rose in his heart and returned to normal. At the same time, he was puzzled. What was the familiar feeling that Jian Wushuang gave off? Why did it feel so familiar? After pondering for a moment, Zhen Wuyang did not intend to investigate further. He had just arrived at the Great Sea region and had already sensed the abnormal fluctuations here, which was why he had rushed over. Now that the crisis in the Six Heavens realm had been resolved, he had to return to Heavenly Court to deal with some hidden dangers. Reaching out his hand to dispel the Imperial Emperor Heavenly Tao that was binding the young emperor, Zhen Wuyang wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he did not say anything and led a group of Grand Yen immortals away. The void that had shattered into chaos was repaired by the Imperial Emperor's Heavenly Tao. All the injuries from the battle did not leave any traces. It was so clean that it was as if nothing had happened. Even the destroyed heavenly regions were reconstructed, but the billions of living beings in them eventually disappeared. Chun Qing and the others were a little dazed as they looked at the clean void with the flowing galaxy. Here, there had been a tragic battle. Close to 2,000 Yen immortals and 3 Grand Yen immortals were buried here. But at this moment, they had all disappeared without a trace. He coughed lightly and slowly came to Jian Wushuang. His eyes were dim as he said, "I'm sorry." Jian Wushuang shook his head. "It's not your fault. Now that things have come to this, you should think about how to make up for it. Brother Jian, what are your plans? No matter what, I, Chun Qing, will be the first to follow you." Chun Qing, who was covered in divine blood, walked out from behind him and said with determination in his eyes, "I'll have a share too. Feng Shan will never back down." Feng Shan, who was even taller than Chun Qing, patted his chest and said. Following that, Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, and Wei Liujia also took a step forward. They all had determined looks on their faces. Hesitation flashed across Zhao Ting's eyes. In the end, she did not take a step forward and stayed where she was. Jian Wushuang forced a smile and turned to look at them. "What are you doing? The battle is over. There's no more fighting. Go back and recuperate." "Brother Jian, is there really nothing else you need to do?" Chun Qing asked. Jian Wushuang nodded. "Of course not. Your top priority now is to recover from your injuries to avoid any hidden injuries." The battle finally ended. Close to 2,000 Yen immortals were buried in the void battlefield. In the end, the Six Heavens realm was preserved, but its foundation had been completely destroyed. Only 1,000 top cultivators were left. Prince Qian, who came to help, was also heavily injured. Only 3 out of the 100 Yen immortals he brought were left. However, not only did he not lament, he was extremely excited. Using a mere 200+ Yen immortals to fight against 2,000+ Yen immortals, and finally defending the Six Heavens realm, this was an impossible battle, but in the end it really happened. Prince Qian was excited because he saw the hidden power of the Six Heavens realm. His gamble this time was the right one. If he made the right bet, it meant that from now on, he would no longer have to do things according to Prince Zhou's wishes. His ethereal immortal province would also be temporarily safe. However, Prince Qian was still a little worried. The Sixth Heavens realm had already declined, and it was unknown whether it could take care of the ethereal Immortal province in the future. Thinking of this, he still felt a little regretful. If he had come a few days later, he would not have been able to catch up with this war. After the battle ended, the top cultivators who had been sent far away returned to the Sixth Heavens realm. After experiencing such a great battle, every top cultivator had completely transformed and matured. If he wanted to survive in such a bloody battle, he had to become stronger to have a chance of survival. The Yen Immortal stage was their ultimate goal. The 6 days returned to silence, and it was still cold. Sitting on the roof of the rebuilt heavenly palace, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and meditated. In this fierce battle, he had obtained his strongest sword intent, and his sword Dao had also reached the stage of perfection stage. Once the Wushuang sword Dao was perfected, Jian Wushuang would enter the sword Immortal stage. At that time, he would probably be able to fight a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Jian Wushuang, who had obtained his strongest sword intent, was not happy at the moment. He even sat on the roof of the heavenly palace expressionlessly. Countless terrifying yen power surged around his body. At the same time, he quickly swallowed several emperor-grade pills. He was trying his best to recover to his peak and was even trying to break through. All the yen power that was born in Little Lonely Heaven was gathering towards him, and the world was changing. After an unknown period of time, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes and could not help but reveal a trace of disappointment. Could it be that there's no way to advance to the Grand Yen Immortal realm? Jian Wushuang was indeed trying to break through to the Grand Yen Immortal realm, but he failed in the end. The failure this time was far more terrifying than any previous failure to break through the realm, because the situation this time was completely different. As a perfect life form, it was extremely difficult for him to break through and advance. Similarly, once he succeeded in breaking through, he would completely crush his enemies at the same level. Although the path to breakthrough was extremely difficult, it was not without a path. If one were to describe each cultivation realm as an ethereal and unknown cloud, although it was within sight but not within reach, there was still a path that could be comprehended. However, Jian Wushuang felt that he could not make any more breakthroughs in his cultivation realm. This was because he had already reached the end of his path in cultivation. After the Yen Immortal stage, there was no more stage to break through. Cold sweat dripped down from Jian Wushuang's temples. He had never thought that his path of advancement would stop at the Yen Immortal stage. As for the Grand Yen Immortal stage, he had no sense of it at all. Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with bitterness. He knew the reason. He came from the divine power universe and did not belong to the cultivation system of the great Yen domain at all. This was despite him cutting off his past in the mortal world and obtaining Yen power. However, in the end, it was unable to produce an immortal source. Without an immortal source, it meant that he would never be able to advance to the Grand Yen Immortal stage. There must be another way. This is definitely not my destination. Slowly exhaling a mouthful of turbid breath, Jian Wushuang's gaze gradually became firm. Since there was a mountain but no path in front of him, he would forcefully open up a path. If he could not even open a path, then there was no harm in destroying the mountain in front of him. However, he would probably be in an extremely passive position in his next plan. Initially, Jian Wushuang had planned to break through to the Yen Immortal stage and ascend to the Grand Yen Immortal stage with all his might during this period of time. However, he had not been able to do so. He was temporarily unable to reach the Grand Yen Immortal stage. However, this concerned his decision to go to the Endless Sea. Originally, he had planned to go to the Endless Sea to find Di Qing after breaking through to the Grand Yen Immortal stage to increase his chances of winning. However, everything was now filled with unknown. However, even so, Jian Wushuang had already made the decision to go to the Endless Sea. Di Qing had been exiled because of him, so bringing him out was something he had to do. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang threw all his worries to the back of his mind and left Little Lonely Heaven in a flash. Jian Wushuang had already arrived in front of the big Lonely Heaven's heavenly palace. He stepped on the clouds and entered the palace quickly. The thin purple-robed man seemed to have been waiting for a long time. When he saw Jian Wushuang, he went up to him and cupped his hands. "Master Jian, The young emperor is not feeling well. I'm afraid he can't see you. Jian Wushuang frowned and said, I only want to ask him one thing. Lord Jian, the young emperor is not feeling well. I'm afraid he won't be able to see you. The thin and small purple-robed man was still blocking in front of him, obviously not planning to let him in. I'm afraid he's not sick at all. Jian Wushuang looked straight at the thin purple-robed man and said seriously, He doesn't want to see me? The thin and small purple-robed man's gaze was slightly evasive. Then, he slowly said, Lord Jian, actually, His Highness doesn't want you to go there. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by the young emperor who walked out from the depths of the heavenly palace. To Ban, you may leave. The thin purple-robed man nodded and left. Come in and sit. It's not that I don't want to see you, the young emperor said faintly. Jian Wushuang did not care. He urgently needed to know how to get to the Endless Sea. How do we go to the Endless Sea? He quickly walked forward and asked directly. The young emperor did not turn around. He seemed to be thinking about something and finally said, I don't want you to go there. But you know I have to go, Jian Wushuang countered. The young emperor turned around and suddenly reached out to hold his arms tightly. He then said, 1 year is very fast. Can you not go? He only needs to wait 1 year. With his ability, he will definitely be safe and sound. Hearing that, Jian Wushuang pushed his palm away without hesitation. He shook his head and said firmly, 1 year is too long. It's long enough for even the heavenly Tao to collapse. Di Qing was exiled to the Endless Sea because of me. I must bring him out of there, or else I won't be able to feel at ease. If he didn't help me, then the one being banished to the Endless Sea would be me, the young emperor said in a hoarse voice. But do you know what is imprisoned in the Endless Sea? That was the source of the chaos in the realm in the past. Even my imperial father didn't dare to relax when he entered the Endless Sea. Do you understand? I might as well tell you now that once you're banished to the Endless Sea, you're practically already sentenced to death. Jian Wushuang's face remained calm and he said calmly, Even so, I have to go. Then let me tell you, once you go in, there's a 99% chance that you'll die inside. The young emperor's eyes revealed nervousness and solemnity. I have to go, he said firmly. Hearing this reply, the young emperor did not say anything else. It was as if he had lost most of his strength as he sat on the jade steps. A moment later, he said, The Endless Sea has a form but no substance. It's a place that is separated from the void and reality. Even a grand Yen Immortal would be lost in it. The Endless Sea doesn't have a real exit, or perhaps only my imperial father knows the exit. But now, the key to the Endless Sea is in your hands. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang was moved. He reached out and took out the golden jade ring that contained Emperor Jin Wuyang's true shadow. This was given to him by the young emperor when he went to Great Mi Heaven. It had saved his life in the void battleground. Jian Wushuang rubbed the golden jade ring in his hand and could not help but say, Can I go to the Endless Sea with this? Yes. The young emperor nodded. This ring contains my imperial father's aura. It can open that passageway. How do I use it? Follow me. In the void, Jian Wushuang stood in a dark place, dressed as a ranger and wearing a loose black robe. Beside him were the young emperor and the thin purple-robed man. The 3 figures were like 3 ancient statues. The void wind could not affect them at all. Has it been decided? The young emperor turned to look at him. Jian Wushuang nodded and said no more. Then he slowly stretched out his palm. The golden jade ring emitted a unique and magnificent light in the chaotic void. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang threw the ring into the void. In an instant, the void suddenly collapsed and tore apart. Thousands of brilliant lights burst out from the golden jade ring, illuminating a large area of the void. That flowing light was the Imperial Emperor's heavenly Tao. They directly tore through the void and constructed an endless passage. The galaxy swirled, and mottled stars shone in the passage. The passage to the Endless Sea was opened. Ahead is the Endless Sea, the young emperor said weakly. Jian Wushuang nodded and prepared to step in. At the same time, The young emperor quietly reached out and grabbed his right arm, looking at him silently. "Don't worry. As long as I don't want to die, I'll definitely come back safely." Jian Wushuang looked at him and said. Then he reached out his hand and pushed his palm away. Stepping into the passageway, the void trembled instantly, and then the huge galaxy passageway slowly closed. The black robe finally disappeared into the passageway, never to be seen again. The void was flattened by the astral winds, and it was as if nothing had happened. "Daban, did I harm him?" His voice was hoarse and slightly sorrowful. The thin purple-robed figure also moved slightly. After a long while, he said, "Your Highness, you shouldn't have let him in. Even if Lord Jian is a heaven's favorite, he probably won't be able to walk out of there alive. After all, that place is a completely unknown territory. I regret it. I don't want him to leave." The young emperor looked at the passageway that had been smoothed out and slowly closed his eyes. The galaxy surged and everything was like a river formed by stars. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the tide and rushed to the end of the passage. The Star River passage was not as dangerous as Jian Wushuang had imagined. Could even be said to be very calm, like a quiet river. However, the more this was the case, the more he could not be careless. The realm that could make Di Qing extremely afraid was far from being as calm as it appeared. As they entered the passageway, everything was just the beginning. The turbulent undercurrents were often hidden under the calm surface of the water. Jian Wushuang had long known this sentence and soon encountered it. He had never thought that everything would happen so quickly that he was caught off guard. Above the dark and endless water, a giant beast with 10 fierce eyes was roaring furiously. In front of this ugly beast, a figure with clear eyes and majestic divine patterns was confronting it from afar. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's face was cold and he had been complaining in his heart. He never thought that he could memorize the location to such an extent. As soon as he descended from the passage, the endless black sea suddenly split apart. Then, an ugly beast with 10 heads opened its huge mouth and swallowed him. If Jian Wushuang had not been on guard, he would have fallen into the giant beast's mouth. Jian Wushuang felt a headache when he saw the black halo on the head of the beast. Because only 5 revolutions and above Grand Yen Immortals would condense their own Yen power halos, it was a symbol of a cultivation realm. Jian Wushuang had never thought that he would provoke such a mighty beast as soon as he stepped into the endless sea. Jian Wushuang was able to deal with a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, but the situation was not so optimistic for a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. He would probably have to fight with his life. However, if he had to fight his life right after stepping into the endless sea, the road ahead would probably be even more impossible. What Jian Wushuang needed to do now was to preserve his best physical strength. Facing such a huge beast, he finally understood why the young emperor had stopped him from entering this place. What exactly was imprisoned in this so-called endless sea? On the dark and thick sea, the giant beast raised its 10 heads and let out a deafening roar. Jian Wushuang felt his body pause for a moment. It was also at this moment that the giant beast suddenly spread its forelimbs and pounced over with a thick force. The sky shook and Jian Wushuang hurriedly released his ancestral skill. The Transcendent's heavenly gate reappeared, and a huge finger that reached the sky came down. However, the giant beast only raised its head and allowed the ancestral skill to land on its body. Rumble. The sea area was violent, stirring up huge waves. The ancestral skill that grew along with Jian Wushuang's growth did not stop the giant beast for even a moment. Caught off guard, Jian Wushuang was suddenly knocked back a distance of 10,000 feet. A deep ravine was plowed out of the clouds. He barely managed to stop after he had traveled 1,000,000 feet. Jian Wushuang held back the surging blood in his heart and became serious. The strength of a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal had already far exceeded his imagination. This huge beast would most likely have a hard time fighting it with all its might. If this continued, it would definitely be detrimental to the situation. Jian Wushuang felt a little frustrated at the thought of this. He took out an emperor-grade pill from his bosom and stuffed it into his mouth to chew. "We have no grudges against each other. There's no need to fight to the death. You can't do anything to me for a while, So why don't you let me go? Jian Wushuang tried to communicate with the beast. A total of 10 heads and 20 pairs of eyes stared at him. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to fight, the 10 heads of the giant beast spoke. His voice was hoarse and deep. Exiled one, what did you eat just now? Jian Wushuang was stunned, but he quickly understood what the beast meant. Then, he took out an emperor-grade pill and waved it in the air. Instantly, an extremely rich medicinal fragrance completely dissipated in the air. Every single one of these emperor-grade pills was a treasure that Emperor Luya had collected in the past. The medicinal fragrance was so dense that it could not be rejected. It filled almost every inch of the sky. The beast's eyes widened. Gulp! The earth-shattering sound of its stomach twitching resounded throughout the wilderness. It was clearly extremely greedy. Give it to me? Jian Wushuang smiled and said, Of course I can give it to you, but you have to let me go and don't bother me anymore. I promise you. The giant beast's eyes were bloodshot, and it was drooling. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang flicked his finger and shot the pill thousands of feet away. In an instant, the giant beast also chased after it. He took advantage of this opportunity to fly 30,000 meters away. Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief when he felt the intimidating aura disappear. At the same time, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. Just relying on a pill to trick a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal away was truly inconceivable. However, before the smile on his face could freeze, an extremely fast sound of air being torn rang out from behind him. Jian Wushuang hurriedly turned around and saw that the giant beast had appeared again. What do you want? Didn't we already agree? He said solemnly. When the giant beast heard this, it smacked its lips in a human-like manner. Then it stretched out its huge front paw and pointed at its head. Do you have more? I have 10 heads. 1 pill is not enough. Jian Wushuang frowned and said, Do you think I have a lot of pills of this level? The one I gave you was the last one. The giant beast smacked its lips and looked at him unwillingly, as if it was considering the truth of his words. After a while, the giant beast said, Then you can leave. Don't let me see you again, and don't appear in my territory again. Jian Wushuang flew away and disappeared in an instant. This time, the giant beast did not chase after him. It was lying on the surface of the sea that was as thick as ink, and its 10 big heads seemed to be thinking about something. How strange! How could such a weak outcast be exiled here? Could it be that he has done too many evil things in the past? As the giant beast pondered, it quickly dove into the pitch-black sea, turning into a line in the water and swimming forward. Jian Wushuang did not stop flying for hundreds of millions of miles until he felt that there was no longer any aura chasing him. He then let out a long sigh. The aura of that 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal was too terrifying. If he continued to fight, he would be heavily injured. Fortunately, he had completely escaped the control of that aura. However, Jian Wushuang did not let his guard down. He quickly found some elixirs that could conceal his aura from the emperor-grade pills he brought. After swallowing them, he continued to observe everything in front of him. The so-called endless sea meant that there was no boundary to the sea. And that was the case right now. The sea, which was as thick as ink, was like a mirror that extended to an unknown place, and he had no reference at all. It was desolate and deathly silent. Jian Wushuang tried to release his yen power to touch the endless sea below him. He saw that the yen power that entered the water was swallowed up immediately. At the same time, countless black chains emerged from the water and shot toward him. Jian Wushuang turned pale with fright. He hurriedly leaped into the sky to avoid being dragged into the sea by the black chain. Looking at the sea that had returned to silence, he heaved a sigh of relief and began to secretly rejoice that he had not carelessly stepped into the sea just now. At the same time, it also made Jian Wushuang understand that the hidden dangers in the endless sea were definitely much more than what was revealed. Most likely, those who could be trapped here were at least at the Grand Yen Immortal stage. After dodging the 10-headed beast, Jian Wushuang did not dare to act rashly. He swallowed an emperor-grade pill that could stabilize his aura and flew forward at a constant speed. Previously, he had learned from the young emperor that the endless sea was formless, shapeless, and ethereal. It was hard to tell if it was a real existence or just an illusion. This increased the difficulty for Jian Wushuang. If it was really as the young emperor said, the endless sea had a form but no substance, and it could transform between shapeless and a state of no substance. That meant that it was very likely to be infinitely large, and could even stuff a universe into it. This was undoubtedly a difficult problem. It was basically impossible to find Di Qing in this seemingly endless ocean. However, Jian Wushuang only pondered for a moment before he resolutely rushed forward. He did not notice that there was an undulating waterline following him in the sea below him. Damn it! Is there no land in the endless sea? Jian Wushuang, who had flown far away, was speechless. With his current speed, he had probably flown over the distance of thousands of heavenly region planes, but he still had not found a single piece of land. This even made him suspect that he was not making any progress. Not only was there no land here, but there wasn't even a trace of yen power, which made him a little solemn. Just as Jian Wushuang was moving forward, an extremely abrupt cry for help came from below. Help! Help! He looked down and could not help but feel a chill in his heart. On the surface of the water, which was as thick as ink, an extremely weak figure was floating. The man used all his strength to push open the water surface, trying to escape from the sea while shouting for help. Even Jian Wushuang felt an indescribable strangeness when such a strange scene appeared in the extremely silent endless sea. Almost 99% of the people who were exiled in the endless sea were extremely evil. If Jian Wushuang was moved by compassion and saved them, he might fall into a great passive situation. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated and prepared to leave. However, the figure that was floating in the sea shouted at this moment, "Help! The true immortal in the sky! Save me!" Jian Wushuang could not help but look at the figure. When their eyes met, he was completely shocked. The figure floating in the sea was none other than Di Qing, who had been exiled by Zhen Wuyang. Di Qing. After Jian Wushuang confirmed that it was Di Qing in the sea area, he immediately descended from the clouds and prepared to help. Di Qing, who was floating in the sea area, was overjoyed when he saw Jian Wushuang landing. At this critical moment, the crystal-like surface of the sea suddenly surged with tens of thousands of waves. Jian Wushuang, who was about to touch Di Qing, felt that the sky in front of him was covered by darkness. The sea was split apart, and a giant beast that looked like a divine mountain leaped out high. It had 10 heads, and each of them was like a huge sun. It was extremely terrifying. At this moment, the 10 giant capitals opened their mouths and swallowed Di Qing. The terrifying aura that belonged to a 6 revolutions grand immortal sent Jian Wushuang flying. "You're courting death." He was furious. He thought that he had completely escaped from the beast, but it was still following behind him. It had even swallowed Di Qing, whom he was looking for. How could he not be furious? However, the giant beast that swallowed Di Qing did not know what was going on and even burped in satisfaction. Jian Wushuang was completely enraged. He condensed an invisible sword and stabbed it at the giant beast. This was a supreme sword strike, a sword strike that was completely detached from the Wushuang sword Dao. This was Sword Immortal Ding Bai's ultimate sword move. Indomitable. Ding. The clearest sword hum resounded through the wilderness, and an unimaginable explosion exploded. Such a sword strike broke through the beast's energy diffraction barrier and pierced into one of its heads. Boom! The sword intent swept through the air and directly shattered a sun-like head. In pain, the giant beast was shocked and furious. It opened its mouth and spat out a wave of energy. The full-strength attack of the 6 revolutions grand immortal hit Jian Wushuang and sent him flying 1,000,000 feet away. The yen power protecting his immortal body shattered. As he retreated, he spat out divine blood and finally stopped. Jian Wushuang lowered his head and looked at his slightly caved-in chest. He could not help but become serious. The full-strength attack of a 6 grand yen immortal was too terrifying. If he was not wearing the 9 heavens mystic robe, his immortal body would have shattered. Vast yen power filled every inch of space, and the giant beast's divine mountain-like figure appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. There were originally 10 heads, but now only 9 were left. It shook off the divine blood on its black mane and said in a low voice, "Junior, do you know that I'm saving you? Save me? Do you know that you have swallowed the person I am looking for?" Jian Wushuang wiped the divine blood from the corner of his mouth and said coldly, "Spit him out." "Spit him out? That guy turned into my nutrients the moment I swallowed him," the giant beast said fiercely. "Now you'll also pay the price. Obediently fall into my stomach." After it finished speaking, the remaining 9 heads roared at this moment. The air stagnated and Jian Wushuang was trapped for a moment. Then, the giant beast roared and rushed over. The clouds were torn apart by its huge claws. Although he was extremely furious, Jian Wushuang did not lose his mind. He could not fight against a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. If he were to risk his life without caring about anything, the final outcome was very likely to be his death. Di Qing had already been swallowed by the giant beast. What Jian Wushuang needed to do now was not to risk his life but to find a way to leave this place. Jian Wushuang released his full strength and barely blocked the beast's attack. He did not plan to continue fighting and immediately escaped. Even if Jian Wushuang could cross realms and fight, more than 3 Grand Evolution Immortals had fallen at his hands. However, facing such a vicious 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, he was still unable to fight him. Above Grand Yen Immortal, every 3 revolutions was a complete transformation. From 3 revolutions to 6 revolutions was a huge change. The giant beast could easily break Jian Wushuang's ancestral skill or even immortal style, which made it extremely difficult for him. If it was not for the fact that mystic garb of the 9 heavens had taken most of the damage, Jian Wushuang would not have been able to fight. The thick and all-pervasive yen power made him suffer greatly. It gave Jian Wushuang the illusion that the beast in front of him was not a beast but a great yen immortal who had experienced hundreds of battles. If they continued to fight, he would only be exhausted by the giant beast. After Jian Wushuang figured out the problem, he used the Wushuang sword Dao to force him to retreat and then fled quickly. "You want to leave?" The giant beast's eyes narrowed. It was clear that it was also determined to kill. Its 9 huge mouths spat out pitch-black pillars of light at the same time. The 9 pillars merged into one and shot up into the sky, directly hitting Jian Wushuang's back. Boom! The unparalleled power exploded. He had no way to dodge and had completely taken the blow. At this moment, the mystic garb of the 9 heavens burst out with the most magnificent blue color and protected Jian Wushuang's immortal body. But even so, the vast yen power still knocked him out in an instant, and he fell headfirst into the sea that was as thick as ink. "I seem to have used too much strength." The giant beast shook its head and said. Then, it looked at the figure that had fallen into the sea and pounced over. When his immortal body entered the water, an unimaginable coldness invaded his body and he fainted. The giant beast flew over and was about to open its mouth to swallow Jian Wushuang. However, dark chains as thick as arms stretched out from the sea and quickly wrapped around Jian Wushuang's limbs, dragging him away. Seeing these chains, the giant beast seemed to be facing a great enemy. Fear flashed in its eyes. However, this fear only lasted for a moment. Then, it opened its huge mouth and bit at Jian Wushuang, who had fainted. However, the chains were so fast that the beast missed. The chain wrapped around Jian Wushuang and he went directly to the bottom of the sea. Soon he disappeared without a trace. The giant beast roared in anger, but in the end, there was nothing it could do. The coldness, deathly stillness, and all kinds of unpredictable negative effects invaded Jian Wushuang's immortal body. He barely had some consciousness, but he could not use a trace of yen power. He could only let the chains drag him into the endless abyss. He forced his eyes open and soon fainted again. Clank! The sound of the iron chains rubbing against the rocks was so loud that it made one's teeth ache. It was mixed with the whistling sound of the water and echoed in Jian Wushuang's ears. He only felt the seawater slapping against his back. Beneath him was solid land. After an unknown period of time, Jian Wushuang finally woke up when there was a flow of yen power in his meridians. He used his hands to prop up his immortal body that was about to fall apart and barely sat on the ground. At this moment, he realized that he was on solid land. So there's actually and in this endless sea area. He was a little surprised, but he quickly regained his composure. Under the last attack of the giant beast, even though Jian Wushuang had the mystic garb of the 9 heavens, he still received the most serious injury. Even though his immortal body was not broken, his meridians were almost broken. It was difficult for him to even circulate his yen power. Beneath him was a grayish-white land, and there were no abnormal fluctuations. Jian Wushuang seized every second to sit up. In this strange endless sea, he had to maintain his peak condition in order to leave this place alive. It was only at this moment that Jian Wushuang realized that the one who was swallowed by the giant beast was not Di Qing. That figure seemed to have used some kind of secret technique to change his face into Di Qing's appearance to confuse him. Moreover, the way the figure acted also confirmed Jian Wushuang's thoughts. Di Qing was so proud that he could even remain calm in front of Jin Wuyang. How could he lose his composure in such a situation? At the same time, it was impossible for him to be swallowed by the giant beast without any struggle. After thinking it through, Jian Wushuang swallowed another emperor-grade pill and recovered with all his might. With the nourishment of the pills, the recovery speed of the undying and imperishable immortal body was extremely fast. In less than half a day, Jian Wushuang had recovered more than 90%. He slowly opened his eyes, and divine patterns flowed around his body. Then, he lowered his head to look at the mystic garb of the 9 heavens that was emitting a faint blue light. What material is this thing made of? It's actually so heaven-defying. Jian Wushuang murmured. The mystic garb of the 9 heavens that could block a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal's full-force attack did not even leave a mark. It might really be able to block an emperor's full-force attack. Jian Wushuang collected his thoughts and began to size up the continent. Rather than calling this place a continent, it would be more appropriate to call it an isolated island. The grayish-white rocks under their feet were full of potholes, and there was not a single weed growing. It was extremely desolate and lonely. After pondering for a moment, Jian Wushuang walked into the depths of the isolated island. Hee, another reckless fellow has come. An ethereal voice suddenly sounded in Jian Wushuang's ears. He was shocked and looked directly at a protruding boulder beside him. Then, a short old man in a thick fur coat walked out from behind the boulder. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed as he saw the thick chain around the elder's neck. That kid! You were also exiled here? The elder in thick fur coat sized up Jian Wushuang as if he was looking at a treasure. Even though he was trying to hold it in, Jian Wushuang could still tell that something was wrong with him. Yes, I was exiled here, Jian Wushuang said calmly. The old man nodded. Then do you know where this is? Where am I? A strange smile appeared on his face, revealing his blood-red gums. Then let me tell you that this is a fallen paradise. Every guy who comes here only has 2 paths. Be killed or survive. This is a free-for-all, ranch of the exiled. The old man slowly raised his arms and said with a strange smile. As his voice fell, a terrifying energy belonging to a grand Yen Immortal spread out. Even though you're just a puny little Yen Immortal, to me it's enough, the old man said greedily. In the next moment, he dashed toward Jian Wushuang and slapped down with his palm. Faced with the attack of an early-stage Grand Evolution Immortal, Jian Wushuang snorted coldly and 30,000 sword intents surged out of his palm. In the next moment, he directly faced the Grand Yen Immortal. Boom! A sudden explosion sounded in the air. The 2 ancestral skills were completely transformed into one punch, and the explosion produced was extremely powerful. Then there was a scream. The old man, who was like a ferocious wolf, was sent flying by Jian Wushuang's punch. Jian Wushuang did not expect this. He was confused as he looked at the elder who flew thousands of feet away and then crashed heavily on the ground. This old man who was clearly at the Grand Yen Immortal stage was a little too weak. Jian Wushuang felt that if he had used more strength, he could have directly smashed the old man. Puzzled, he flew over to the old man who was lying on the ground. The old man panted heavily and his face was covered in divine blood. When he saw Jian Wushuang walking over, he hurriedly got up and retreated. There was only fear in his eyes. You, who exactly are you? How can a mere yen immortal have such strength? He covered his face and said in a trembling voice, I'm the man who will kill you. Jian Wushuang said coldly and raised his palm. Jian Wushuang had never shown any mercy to his enemies. When the old man heard this, his face turned ashen. Then he directly knelt down with a thud. I beg you to raise your hand and let me go. I've lived in this endless sea for countless years. I only want to be able to leave alive one day. As long as Sir can spare my life, I'm willing to do anything. Jian Wushuang withdrew his palm and stopped killing. Tell me, where's this place? Have any unfamiliar faces come here these days? The old man looked as if he had been pardoned. Sir, this place is called Ranch of the Exiled. I don't know when it was created, but the one who created this place is still alive and is in charge of maintaining order here. This place is called the Ranch of the Exiled because there are a large number of exiles gathered here. If we want to survive, we can only fight endlessly. The dead Grand Yen Immortals were used to fill the ground beneath their feet to stabilize this place. As he said this, the old man pointed at the chain around his neck. Only by killing a certain number of Grand Yen Immortals can the chain be unlocked and you can survive here. How many have you killed? Jian Wushuang looked at him and said, I'm ashamed. Not a single one, the old man said with shame. I just want to continue living. Hearing that, Jian Wushuang asked again, Have you seen any unfamiliar faces in the past few days? He was tall and looked very valiant. There were golden feathers in his hair. Listening to his description, the old man pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, Sir, this endless sea is almost a pool of stagnant water. In recent years, no one has been exiled to enter. The person you described definitely could not have come here. A flash of disappointment flashed across Jian Wushuang's eyes. Then he turned around and prepared to leave. Sir, this ranch of the exiled is dangerous. Please don't stay here any longer and leave as soon as possible. The old man quickly stepped forward and gritted his teeth. The sooner, the better. Although Jian Wushuang was a little confused, he could tell that he was not lying. He nodded and prepared to leave. However, it was already too late. Several black lights burst out from the surroundings and stood in front of Jian Wushuang. A total of 4 figures with rich energy appeared. They locked onto the stranger in an instant. 3 short and 1 tall, 3 early-stage Grand Yen Immortals and 1 3 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Each of them had extremely abundant derivation energy. However, their eyes were all red, as if they had seen prey. The old man's expression changed drastically and he said in a low voice, Sir, let's leave quickly. If we don't leave now, we really won't be able to leave. Jian Wushuang's expression turned grave. If he was facing a single Grand Yen Immortal, he would not be afraid at all. However, now that he was facing 4 Grand Yen Immortals, the situation was not optimistic. At this moment, the tallest Grand Yen Immortal among the 4 saw the old man beside Jian Wushuang and sneered. So you, the old shepherd, dare to attack? This is your prey? A new exiled person. The old man who was called Old Shepherd gritted his teeth and said nothing. Finally, he said, That's right. This is my prey. You can leave. The 4 Grand Yen Immortals laughed at the same time. You, an old shepherd, dare to speak like this? Your prey. The tallest Grand Yen Immortal walked out and waved his hand across the air. Immediately, the unparalleled yen energy sent him flying. The old man flew 1,000 feet away like a kite with a broken string, then fell to the ground. Everything happened too quickly. By the time Jian Wushuang reacted, the 4 Grand Evolution Immortals had already rushed toward him. For unparalleled flows of energy exploded in a corner of the continent. The air trembled, clearly unable to withstand the might of a Grand Yen Immortal. In the next moment, a 7-star galaxy appeared between Jian Wushuang's eyebrows. Immortal style, Little Mountain River. The current Little Mountain River was no longer the Little Mountain River from before. It had grown along with Jian Wushuang's growth. He suddenly opened his 5 fingers and burst out a huge torrent. The yen power turned into a torrent and gushed out. Caught off guard, it swept away the 3 Grand Yen Immortals who were at the front. Rumble! The torrent exploded, causing the 4 grand yen immortals to be in a sorry state. After stopping, the shortest grand yen immortal was furious. "Damn it! I will definitely kill you today." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly condensed a long spear in his hand and threw it at Jian Wushuang. The long spears expanded in the wind and split into thousands in an instant. They came at him like a rain of spears. Jian Wushuang did not panic at all when he saw this scene. He quietly condensed an invisible sword in his hand. He stood with his sword in hand, the wind blowing at the corner of his clothes, making him look desolate and lonely. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. First move. Star. The sword slashed out without any fancy moves. In an instant, 1,000,000 sword intents descended from the sky. The rain of nearly 1,000 spears that came at them were shattered when they came into contact with the sword intents. Not even a trace of their aura was left behind. Moreover, that sword strike did not lose its momentum as it surged forward, tearing the land under its feet apart. The short grand yen immortal who was the first to bear the brunt was shocked. He had never thought that this sword strike would be so terrifying. The sword intents were like a mountain or a sea, instantly wrapping him up. The other 3 grand yen immortals dodged in time and watched this scene with trepidation. The entire endless sea was stirred up by this unbridled sword intent, and huge waves of 1,000,000 feet were set off, almost bordering the sky. The 3 grand yen immortals who had dodged looked at the sword curtain that was surging crazily, and then looked at Jian Wushuang with lingering fear. How could this guy who could fight a grand yen immortal be a yen immortal? Could it be that he was a powerful existence who had been banished for countless years and had deliberately disguised himself as a yen immortal to come here? Thinking of this, they all put away their contempt and prepared for a battle. The sword intent that blotted out the sky finally dissipated. When the 3 grand yen immortals saw this scene, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The clothes of that short grand yen immortal were torn to shreds. His entire body was covered in blood, and there was not a single piece of flesh on his immortal body. He was on the verge of collapsing, and his body was about to lose its balance. "You, who exactly are you?" He suddenly spat out a large mouthful of divine blood. He was terrified to the extreme. With just one sword, he had forced a grand yen immortal to such an extent, and he was even able to do it so easily. This was something that even a rank 3 grand yen immortal could not do. The other 3 grand yen immortals retreated without leaving a trace, their gazes solemn. The old man wiped his nose and hurriedly sat up from the ground. His eyes widened as he watched this scene. Putting away the invisible sword, Jian Wushuang put his hands behind his back and walked forward calmly. Facing the 4 grand yen immortals, although he appeared extremely calm, he was already sweating profusely internally. After all, he was facing 4 grand yen immortals. If he did not suppress them with his aura, it would probably be impossible for him to escape. Regardless of whether he could win or not, he had to intimidate them first. "You dare to block my way?" Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, his voice filled with supreme authority. The short grand yen immortal who had almost died under that sword retreated. Although he wanted to take revenge, he did not dare to have any other thoughts. "If you don't dare to block my path, you can leave immediately." When he heard this, he snorted coldly and looked straight ahead. He did not even look at the grand yen immortals and directly moved forward. None of the 4 grand yen immortals dared to stop him. They could only watch Jian Wushuang leave. Seeing that they were defeated, the elder grinned and rushed to Jian Wushuang. "Sir, wait for me." The old man caught up with him, and a fawning smile appeared on his face. "You definitely don't know how to leave this place. I guarantee that I'll bring you out safely." Hearing his words, Jian Wushuang asked, "Why? Is it that we can only enter but not leave this mainland?" The old man nodded. "Indeed, you can only enter but not leave. Once you leave, you'll alert that person's aura. At that time, if he makes a move, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave." "The one you mentioned is very powerful?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. "Not only is he powerful, but he's simply extremely powerful. He's a supreme existence here. Even a 9 revolutions grand yen immortal can't hurt him at all," the old man said. There was fear in his eyes. Jian Wushuang did not say anything else. If what he said was true, the mysterious existence who created this continent had probably surpassed the level of a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Could he be the emperor? He thought about it in his heart, but he quickly rejected this idea. No matter how strong Jin Wuyang was back then, he probably could not have sealed an emperor. Of course, it was just Jian Wushuang's guess. He did not want to know the truth. The most important thing now was to leave this place as soon as possible. What about Big Brother? Did he really let that guy escape? The few Grand Yen Immortals who were stunned by Jian Wushuang and did not dare to move began to discuss in low voices. The Grand Yen Immortal, who was almost sliced into a bloody gourd, was indignant. The 4 of us attacking together? I don't believe that we can't defeat him. Idiot. Do you know that you're about to be beaten to death? The tallest Grand Yen Immortal, who was also the only 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, said angrily. If we rashly attack him, you will definitely be the first to die. Then what do we do now? Are we really going to let him go? Another short Grand Yen Immortal with 2 strands of beard said anxiously. If we kill him, we can exchange it for merit. At this moment, a dark-faced and extremely calm Grand Yen Immortal said, this little Grand Yen Immortal can't even be exchanged for a single merit. Second brother, what did you say? Is he really a Yen Immortal? The tall Grand Yen Immortal hurriedly asked. He nodded. Although I don't know what secret technique he used to beat third bro to this state, his aura can't be changed. He's undoubtedly a Yen Immortal. Then what are we waiting for? Let's just rush over and kill him to avenge me. The third brother said fiercely. The tall Grand Yen Immortal was thinking about something. He quickly gritted his teeth and said, damn it, no matter what, we can't let go of this small merit. With just the 4 of us, I don't believe that we can't kill that guy. Even if we take a step back, he can't do anything to us when the 4 of us are together. They looked at each other and directly rushed forward. Not good, sir. Those guys are catching up. The old man said hurriedly, but by the time Jian Wushuang reacted, it was already too late, for streaks of flowing light descended, blocking all his escape routes from 4 directions. Seeing this, the old man's legs trembled and he almost could not stand steadily. Jian Wushuang's heart sank. The thing he was most worried about had come. The pressure released by the 4 Grand Yen Immortals was extremely terrifying, almost suppressing all auras. Up until now, the lowest level of exiles he had encountered in this endless sea was the Grand Yen Immortal. This was something that was simply unimaginable in the outside world. This also caused Jian Wushuang to be in a very passive situation. With his arms crossed, the tall Grand Yen Immortal with a smile that was not a smile looked straight at him. Brat, leave your life behind and I will spare your corpse. Sir, you can't listen to him. Once you lose, your immortal body will be buried under the ground. The old man reminded nervously. Old shepherd, if you don't go back to herding the sheep, I'll bury you into the land as well. The tall Grand Yen Immortal said angrily. Jian Wushuang, who had been silent all this while, glanced at him and said calmly, you need to take my life, but not everyone can take it. Try me. The tall Grand Yen Immortal smiled ferociously as his body's energy surged out, instantly covering the sky and the sun. Then I will try today to see how much you can do. The calm second brother hurriedly reminded him, Big brother, don't be rash. However, he waved his hand. None of you are to participate in this battle. Jian Wushuang was delighted. As long as they did not attack together, he still had a chance of winning. Jian Wushuang was confident that he could suppress a 3 revolutions Grand Immortal without using his strongest move. Therefore, he was not afraid. That tall and strong Grand Yen Immortal would definitely have to pay the price for his arrogance. Waving his hand to keep his 3 brothers out of the battle, the tall and strong Grand Yen Immortal grinned hideously and looked at Jian Wushuang with greed in his eyes. In the next moment, he took the initiative to make a move. The earth-shaking momentum of the Yen power was fully displayed at this moment. Even Jian Wushuang held his breath. The old man's expression changed drastically. After taking a look at Jian Wushuang, he gritted his teeth and ran out of the battle. Facing the extremely powerful energy, he did not move at all. He was like a statue, standing still. This made the tall and strong Grand Yen Immortal extremely furious. He suddenly shook his arms and aimed them at Jian Wushuang. In an instant, heaven and earth flourished, and layers of black ripples burst forth. There were thousands of layers, and in the middle of each layer, mysterious runes flowed, surging with unimaginable power. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes turned solemn. He clenched his right fist and faced the black ripples that were enveloping him. He punched out. Boom! An indescribable explosion spread out, and deep ravines appeared on the ground. Time seemed to have stopped. Nearly 1,000 black ripples stopped in front of Jian Wushuang, unable to move an inch further. The 3 Grand Yen Immortals outside the battle circle watched this scene nervously. Jian Wushuang did not retract his fist, but remained motionless. The ground under his feet had already cracked into deep ravines, and like a spider web, they instantly spread out for thousands of feet. In the next moment, the 1,000-layer black ripples split open from the center of Jian Wushuang's fist. As if the dark clouds had dispersed, the great momentum of the yen power shattered layer by layer. The dark light dissipated and the tall Grand Yen Immortal looked at Jian Wushuang in horror. This was his ultimate immortal style. Even Grand Yen Immortals of the same realm had no choice but to avoid it. But now, this was just a mere Yen Immortal and he actually blocked his immortal style. This was simply too unbelievable. So much so that the tall and strong Grand Yen Immortal did not dare to stop and released the second immortal style. Great Eye Wheel! He roared angrily, raising his arms above his head. At the same time, endless derivative energy gathered in his palms. An eye wheel that was thousands of feet in size appeared at this moment. Jian Wushuang retracted his fist and looked up at the void. The black wheel that was completely formed by the yen power was thousands of meters in size, and lightning snakes gathered inside. As the energy gathered, the eye wheel looked like a demonic eye that could pierce through the sky and earth. Under the cover of the eye wheel, everything became dim. "Ha! Ants, die for me!" The tall Grand Yen Immortal who was floating in the air laughed out loud. As his voice rang out, the terrifying eye wheel between his arms slowly opened. Countless strands of silk-like yen power shot out from the eye wheel. The dark purple derivative energy swallowed the sky and covered the sun. It was extremely terrifying. Under the light of the eye wheel, a layer of the ground was incinerated and it quickly approached Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was extremely solemn. In the next moment, a layer of blood traces suddenly condensed around his body. The blood-red patterns were extremely demonic. This was the slaughter Dao that Sir Yuan had transformed from the blood essence hidden in his body. It was an extreme killing intent. Once the slaughter Dao was activated, Jian Wushuang's consciousness would fall into extreme thirst for blood. At the same time, his strength would far exceed the addition of the selfless true shadow. Facing the demonic eyes attack, he activated the slaughter Dao. At this moment, it was the battle between the scarlet and dark purple. The ground that was covered by the dark purple intent suddenly condensed into a scarlet intent. It was like a blazing red prairie, filled with an imposing aura. Even though the light beams cast by the eye will devoured the area, it still forcefully squeezed open a crack. Jian Wushuang's black robe had been completely torn, revealing his chest that was crisscrossed with scarlet divine patterns. He roared, and in the next moment, he flew into the sky with the endless dark purple yen power. Under his attack, all the energy beams were shattered. Looking at the scarlet figure that tore a crack in the endless barrier and rushed towards him, the tall and strong Grand Yen Immortal was so frightened that he could not speak and even forgot to move. Rumble! Jian Wushuang threw a punch and the terrifying fist aura directly tore apart the last layer of the dark purple energy diffraction barrier. The fist aura expanded by 1,000,000 feet in the wind, carrying endless killing intent. In the end, it bombarded the dark purple demonic eye without any obstruction. This was a moment that made the sky dim as boundless killing intent pierced into the demonic eye like true swords. There was no magnificent explosion. In fact, this scene only existed for an instant. Then, Everything disappeared like a fleeting cloud. The demonic eye that was millions of feet tall was smashed into pieces. The tall Grand Yen Immortal was stunned on the spot and didn't even have time to react. By the time he reacted, the figure that was surrounded by scarlet light had already disappeared. Then he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Something had broken. The tall and strong Grand Yen Immortal could only feel the energy in his immortal body flowing rapidly, unable to condense again. He subconsciously looked down at his chest. He saw a palm break open his chest from behind and pluck out an extremely dazzling star. That was an immortal source belonging to a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. In the next moment, he clenched his fist and shattered the immortal source. "No, don't." After the tall and strong Grand Yen Immortal said this last sentence, he completely lost all signs of life. Like trash, he fell straight to the ground. With a rumbling sound, dust and smoke rose up. The corpse of the dead Grand Yen Immortal was absorbed by some kind of energy and turned into a grayish-white stone. The world was deathly silent. The old man's mouth was wide open. Clearly, he was completely shocked by the scene just now. The other 3 Grand Yen Immortals had yet to recover from that scene. Just like that, their big brother died in the hands of a Yen Immortal. Jian Wushuang threw away the shattered immortal source in his palm and looked at the remaining 3 Grand Yen Immortals with his red eyes. He smiled devilishly, and the bloodlust in his heart was completely released. After killing one, we'll have to kill the second one. None of you will be able to escape today. Jian Wushuang stretched out his palm and pointed at them one by one, as if he had sentenced them to death in advance. The 3 Grand Yen Immortals trembled. After exchanging a glance, they immediately scattered in all directions. Jian Wushuang smiled devilishly again. "You want to leave? It's too late." His body was like a bloodthirsty sword as he rushed forward. A scarlet crack was torn open in the sky. "Split up and go to the center," the short Grand Yen Immortal with a calm face shouted. Then the 3 Grand Yen Immortals split up. 3 streaks of light flew in 3 different directions. Jian Wushuang smiled coldly and disappeared. 1,000,000 miles in an instant. The Grand Yen Immortal who was running wildly turned his head to look. When he realized that there was no one chasing him, he let out a long sigh. The scene just now was too shocking. Killing a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal by himself was too unbelievable and terrifying. Even their big brother had been killed. If they did not escape, they would probably end up in an extremely miserable state. The old Grand Yen Immortal thought so, but he soon realized that his body could not move, as if he had fallen into a quagmire. How is this possible? In the next moment, a figure with a biting cold killing intent quietly appeared behind him. He looked at him with a smile that was not a smile and then stretched out his hand to touch his back. Swish! A soft sound rang out as divine blood gushed out from the chest of the Grand Yen Immortal Elder, sprinkling down to the 9 heavens. "No, impossible. I'm a Grand Yen Immortal. How could I die? I've endured countless years. How can I die now?" This was the last thought that echoed in his mind. As the immortal source shattered, he followed in the footsteps of the tall Grand Yen Immortal, turning into a pile of bones. "Second brother." 2 voices rang out in shock. The 2 Grand Yen Immortals who had been frantically running away stopped in their tracks as they looked at this scene with their eyes wide open. Jian Wushuang threw away the immortal corpse in his hand as if he was throwing trash and looked at them with bloodshot eyes. After killing the 2 Grand Yen Immortals, he realized that the Grand Yen Immortals on this island were nearly twice as weak as the real Grand Yen Immortals. A 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal only had the strength of a Grand Yen Immortal at the initial stage. Jian Wushuang did not know why this was the case, but it undoubtedly increased his chances of winning. It allowed him to face any Grand Yen Immortal with ease. After killing another Grand Yen Immortal, he did not intend to let the remaining 2 Grand Yen Immortals go. Furthermore, the 2 Grand Yen Immortals did not escape. Instead, they charged at Jian Wushuang furiously. Heaven and earth shook, and the entire grayish-white land beneath him was once again split apart by the impact. Facing the attacks of the 2 Grand Yen Immortals, Jian Wushuang was still undefeated even though it was a little strenuous. The invisible sword in his hand had already turned scarlet. Wherever the blade passed, it plowed a deep gully in the ground. The two short Grand Yen Immortals were in a difficult position. They thought that they could kill Jian Wushuang with their strength, but they were unable to move him at all. The destruction caused by the invisible sword that carried the intent of slaughter was terrifying. Every sword chi that was slashed out was enough to split the earth. Moreover, Jian Wushuang swung his sword at an extremely fast speed. Every sword strike carried 36,000 sword intents. Ah! One of the Grand Yen Immortals cried out in shock. His entire left arm was chopped off by the sword intent and turned into fine powder. "Retreat quickly!" The other Grand Yen Immortal with a mustache exclaimed before turning around to flee. But what welcomed him was a merciless sword strike. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. Second move. River. A million sword intents suddenly descended, like a river in the sky, directly tearing through the void and surging out. Jian Wushuang stood at the head of the sword river tide and faced the two fleeing Grand Yen Immortals. He casually threw the sword in his hand. The invisible sword fell into the air and instantly disintegrated into countless sword intents. Each sword intent carried endless killing intent. The dim sky was dyed red. Looking at the boundless sword intent that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, the two Grand Yen Immortals' faces turned ashen. Then they were trapped by the sword intents. Clouds of blood mist exploded in the sky, and the millions of sword intents finally dissipated. At this point, the four Grand Yen Immortals had all fallen at Jian Wushuang's hands. As the slaughter Dao retreated, Jian Wushuang, who was standing in the air, lost his balance and almost fell down. He forcefully supported his body and quickly took out a few Emperor-grade pills from his bosom before stuffing them into his mouth. The slaughter Dao was so overbearing that even Jian Wushuang's body was almost completely exhausted. If he did not carry nearly 1,000 Emperor-grade pills with him, he would definitely not have released the slaughter Dao so easily. After swallowing the pill and recovering 90% of his body, Jian Wushuang was ready to leave. The battle with the four Grand Yen Immortals was too earth-shattering. It was likely that other Grand Yen Immortals would come over soon after hearing the news. If he did not leave in time, he would probably get himself burned. As if to confirm Jian Wushuang's thoughts, when he was about to leave, a series of swift air-braking sounds flew over from all directions. A stream of light like the sun and stars quickly appeared with endless power. At this moment, the old man lying on the ground revealed his head and said in horror, "Sir, you should quickly escape. That guard is here. You can't be caught." Jian Wushuang knew that things were not looking good. He suddenly stopped and rushed forward. However, no matter how fast he was, he could not outrun the encirclement of over 10 Grand Yen Immortals. After dozens of breaths, 10 figures appeared. 10 Grand Yen Immortals surrounded Jian Wushuang from every direction. They were all wearing loose black robes, and even their faces were hidden under the black robes. They were extremely mysterious. Even so, Jian Wushuang instantly sensed that the lowest realm of each black-robed man was a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. The black-robed leader waved his hand, and a pitch-black bone whip that was dozens of feet long appeared in his hand. The dark bone whip was like the spine of a giant beast. It was full of barbs. With the support of the Yen power, it looked extremely ferocious. Most likely, a normal Yen Immortal would die from a single strike of that whip. Those who destroy the heavenly continent will be destroyed immediately. A deep voice rang out from under the black robe. In the next moment, the leader of the black-robed men did not say another word. He raised the black bone whip in his hand and lashed it at Jian Wushuang. The bone whip expanded to 1,000 feet in the wind, and it roared like a dragon. His heart suddenly froze. If this whip was really lashed, he would probably lose more than half of his combat strength on the spot. Jian Wushuang did not dare to be careless. He retreated 1,000 feet and waved his hand to release the immortal style. A divine mountain appeared in the void without any warning and blocked the bone whip. However, it only blocked for a moment before the dark bone whip broke through the divine mountain and pounced at Jian Wushuang as if it had its own intelligence. The black bone whip expanded in the wind, and every black bone spike on it protruded out ferociously, surrounded by an endless amount of energy. Even Jian Wushuang's undying and imperishable immortal body could not withstand such a whip. Seeing the arrival of these black-robed men, the old man lying on the ground was almost scared out of his wits and hurriedly fled. These black-robed men were the envoys of that person, the true law enforcers of this so-called heavenly continent. If any Yen immortal dared to destroy a piece of heavenly continent, they would be punished. The lighter ones would be killed on the spot, and their immortal bodies would fill the continent. The more serious ones would have their souls extracted and endure endless years of lashing and punishment. Therefore, the grand Yen immortals in this heavenly continent did not dare to destroy even a little bit of the heavenly continent, even if they fought and killed. This was because if they destroyed it, there would be the most severe punishment. But now, Jian Wushuang had killed 4 grand Yen immortals, and the sword intent he released almost tore apart the entire land. The destructive power he had caused was too terrifying. It was as if the land had been overturned by him. The ravine that was like a natural moat split the land into pieces. The pitch-black water was surging, and it was a scene of doomsday. The immortal style that Jian Wushuang released only lasted for a moment before it was dispersed. 10 black-robed grand Yen immortals surrounded him from all directions. Each of them held a black bone whip in their hands. As they waved their arms, the bone whip whipped toward Jian Wushuang like a true dragon. The 10 bone whips expanded with the wind, blocking all the paths in all directions and closing in on the center. Jian Wushuang had no choice but to take it head-on. Crack! A fine sound rang out at this moment. 10 bone whips intertwined and lashed heavily on his immortal body. Jian Wushuang's vision went dark and he almost fainted. When the bone whip hit him, it was as if 10,000 divine mountains were crashing down on him. 10 whips felt like 100,000 or even 1,000,000 whips. Even a 6 revolutions grand Yen immortal would not be able to survive under these bone whips. At this moment, the mystic garb of the 9 heavens emitted a blue light and protected Jian Wushuang's immortal body with all its strength. But even so, the immortal body under the mystic garb of the 9 heavens cracked and divine blood gushed out. Ah! Jian Wushuang roared in pain and his eyes turned red. He grabbed the bone whip around his neck and struggled hard. In an instant, the whip spirit of the black bone whip shattered, and the bone fragments of the entire bone whip scattered to the ground. However, this was only the beginning. Scarlet divine marks surrounded Jian Wushuang's body, and the slaughter Dao strengthened his body again. At the same time, the selfless true shadow with a hazy blue aura also augmented his body at this moment. The sky blue and scarlet Shin glyphs blended together, presenting an unprecedented terrifying power. This was the first time Jian Wushuang had merged selfless true shadow with slaughter Dao. Billions of brilliant lights shot out from his body. His black hair, which was wrapped in Shin glyphs, broke free of his belt and danced wildly in the air. His eyes were crimson red, and his pupils were indeed sky blue without any impurities. They were extremely beautiful and sacred. The effect of adding selfless true shadow to slaughter Dao was far more terrifying than Jian Wushuang had imagined. This was far from being as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It was a geometric upward trend. At this moment, Jian Wushuang felt that even his immortal body could not contain the terrifying power. In the next moment, he roared. With him as the center, the sky was torn apart, and the black water on the ground surged into huge waves. The dark bone whips that were binding him were actually unable to withstand the great force at this moment and shattered one after another. The black-robed leader's gaze, hidden under his hood, froze. He felt a shiver in his heart. No, that's impossible. How could I feel the trembling? He's just a mere Yen immortal. As he thought about this, he was soon shocked by the scene before him. Jian Wushuang's limbs were almost locked. Although he did not move, the bone whip that bound him was quickly covered with cracks and was about to break. All the black-robed men were shocked. Looking at the cracked bone whip in their hands, they increased their strength again. The leader of the black-robed men felt that something was wrong. He tried to retract the bone whip, but he was shocked to find that the bone whip seemed to be sucked in by some kind of suction force and could not break free. A sense of foreboding rose in his heart, and he directly threw away the dark bone whip in his hand. Just as he let go, Jian Wushuang moved. A monstrous force surged from his body. The bone whips on his limbs could no longer withstand it at this moment and completely shattered. Then, Jian Wushuang suddenly grabbed the two bone whips at his waist and twisted them hard. In an instant, the two bone whips spun and the ferocious bone spikes on them were crushed into powder by the huge force. Both the three revolutions Grand Yen Immortals who were controlling the bone whips could not react in time. The bone whips in their hands were twisted into a fried dough twist by the terrifying force. However, the immense force did not disappear into thin air. Instead, it passed through the bone whip and transferred to the arms of the two Grand Yen Immortals. Ah! Screams rang out as the unimaginable force broke the bone whips and directly twisted the arms of the Grand Yen Immortals. Divine blood splattered, and the two arms fell into the void. All the black-robed men were shocked and quickly retreated. To be able to break free from this restraint, he definitely wasn't as simple as a Yen Immortal. Jian Wushuang broke free from the restraints on his body. He did not stop. His entire body was like a true sword that had gathered the ultimate development power and shot forward. In an instant, the surrounding formation was shattered by the impact. The two Grand Yen Immortals who had lost an arm could not withstand Jian Wushuang's attack at all. A punch that condensed the selfless true shadow and the slaughter Dao blasted out. The violent scarlet fist directly smashed a huge hole in the immortal body of one of the black-robed Grand Yen Immortals, and the immortal source shattered as a result. For some unknown reason, the strength of all the Grand Yen Immortals bound in the Endless Sea had more or less dropped to a certain level. This was also the reason why Jian Wushuang could easily crush an ordinary Grand Yen Immortal. After killing a black-robed Grand Yen Immortal with a punch, Jian Wushuang's momentum did not decrease. His entire body emitted a powerful aura that was difficult to look at directly. Another heavy punch smashed out. The other Grand Yen Immortal who had lost an arm could not dodge in time and was blasted into dust on the spot. He was like a demon god. Even if there were 10 Grand Yen Immortals surrounding him, he was not afraid. Billions of scarlet light flowed around his body, blocking most of the attacks. There were originally 10 Grand Yen Immortals, but now only 8 remained. After recovering from their initial shock, the remaining 8 Grand Yen Immortals quickly regained their composure. They released a thick and boundless Yen power and crushed Jian Wushuang again. A Grand Yen Immortal was still a Grand Yen Immortal after all. Even if his strength was weakened for some reason, he was still terrifying to the extreme. Under the combined attack of the 8 Grand Yen Immortals, Jian Wushuang's counterattack was stopped. Even with the selfless true shadow and the support of the slaughter Dao, he was still at a disadvantage. To be able to survive in this endless sea until now, these Grand Yen Immortals were all terrifying characters who had experienced thousands of battles. Suppress! The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal roared, and a sky-covering golden seal pressed down on Jian Wushuang. At the same time, the other 7 Grand Yen Immortals released their first attack. Jian Wushuang was attacked from both sides and he had no way to dodge. He once again took the full-strength attack of the 8 Grand Yen Immortals. A heaven-shaking explosion exploded. The old man who was lying on the ground nervously watching this scene was frightened out of his wits. He did not even have time to escape before he was swept away by an indescribable force. It was as if the mountains and seas were about to collapse, and everything was like the end of the world. In this so-called heavenly continent, nearly 1/10 of the plain had been turned into ashes under this fierce battle. In the void, Jian Wushuang spat out a large mouthful of divine blood and his aura was extremely weak. The sky-covering golden seal directly broke through his defense. The remaining 7 Yen Immortals' full-strength attacks came over. If it was not for the protection of the mystic garb of the 9 heavens, Jian Wushuang's immortal body would have disintegrated. Seeing that he had only spat out a mouthful of divine blood, all the black-robed Grand Yen Immortals turned pale with fright and found it unbelievable. One had to know that even a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal could only die in regret when faced with the encirclement of 8 Grand Yen Immortals. Their immortal bodies could not even survive. However, this monster-like Yen Immortal had refreshed their understanding. Facing the combined attack of 8 grand yen immortals, he only spat out a mouthful of divine blood? Even his immortal body was not damaged at all? What was this immortal body made of? It was the leading grand yen immortal who noticed the problem first. He noticed the blue armor that flashed on Jian Wushuang's body. Then, he shouted in a low voice, "Retreat!" The 8 grand yen immortals instantly retreated. Too late, Jian Wushuang roared. The slaughter Dao gave him not only violent power, but also thirst for blood and the desire to fight. The desire to fight was beyond imagination, to the point of exchanging one's life for another. Facing the 8 grand yen immortals, he did not retreat and escape. Instead, he directly met them head-on. Among them, the grand yen immortal closest to Jian Wushuang had just released his yen power barrier when it was broken by a punch. By the time he reacted, the fist had already opened a big hole in his chest. No! The black-robed grand yen immortal was terrified. He wanted to use his hand to cover his broken chest, but he realized that it was all in vain. The immortal source was shattered and Jian Wushuang threw it into the void as if he was throwing trash. Then, he moved extremely fast and rushed into the grand yen immortal's camp. Facing such a disorganized but extremely terrifying enemy, they were actually helpless. In the chaotic sky, bloody mists exploded from time to time. The 7 figures were also continuously decreasing. 6, 5, 4. Jian Wushuang seemed to know no exhaustion as he fought back crazily, leaving cracks all over his immortal body that was exposed outside the mystic garb of the 9 heavens. There were more than 10 emperor-grade pills in his mouth. It was as if he was eating candy. Once he could not hold on any longer, he would swallow one and continue fighting. In the end, there were only 3 grand yen immortals left in the chaotic sky. There were originally 10 black-robed grand yen immortals, but only 3 were left. This was an unimaginable scene. The eyes of the black-robed grand yen immortal who was the leader were about to split open. At this moment, only vengeance was left in his divine thought. This was a humiliating scene. In the next moment, he shook his arms and released a heaven-shaking power. "Brat, I will definitely kill you here today." Jian Wushuang sneered. "That's exactly what I wanted to say. Today you'll have to deal with me one by one. None of you can escape from me. Then let's see who's right." The leading grand yen immortal shouted angrily. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang took the lead and crushed them with endless killing intent. "Attack!" he shouted. As his voice fell, the 2 grand yen immortals behind him moved. Streams of extremely thick derivative energy suddenly shot out and bound Jian Wushuang. Caught off guard, he paused for a moment. It was during this pause that the leading grand yen immortal moved. Layers of sky-covering golden seals appeared above his head and pressed down on Jian Wushuang. The golden seal of this level had made Jian Wushuang suffer a little before. Now it descended again and suppressed him. Suppress! The golden seal enveloped him, causing him to pause for a moment. At this moment, the black-robed grand yen immortal broke the golden seal and released a thunderous attack. Countless golden lights shot down like spears, completely enveloping Jian Wushuang. The black-robed grand yen immortal's body emitted a unique glow, especially in his palm, where a deep glow flashed. In the next moment, he quietly appeared in front of Jian Wushuang like a ghost. Then, his fingers, which were as sharp as knives, suddenly stabbed into Jian Wushuang's chest. Jian Wushuang's face turned pale instantly. The black-robed grand yen immortal's palm pierced through the mystic garb of the 9 heavens and pierced into his body. Divine blood spurted out and sprinkled in the void. Under the black hood, the black-robed grand yen immortal revealed a smug smile. He had seen through the flaws of the supreme treasure Jian Wushuang was wearing and had tried with staking all his efforts. Unexpectedly, he had succeeded. Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and coughed out a mouthful of divine blood. His face was extremely pale. He had not expected that the hidden danger left behind by his sword strike would actually be used by others. In the last battle with Chang Duoling, the immortal lord of the 9 heavens, Jian Wushuang had comprehended his most powerful sword move. He had used his strongest sword move to tear apart Chang Duoling's mystic garb of the 9 heavens and finally shattered his immortal source. After Chang Duoling's death, he gave the mystic garb of the 9 heavens to Jian Wushuang. However, the gap left on the mystic garb could no longer be mended. It was only an extremely tiny wound. However, it was seen through by the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal, and he gave him a thunderous blow. Although Jian Wushuang did not have an immortal source, he was still severely injured. The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal who had torn his palm apart was also puzzled. He realized that this strange Yen Immortal did not have an immortal source. "Are you done touching me?" Although Jian Wushuang was extremely weak, he still looked at him coldly. The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal suddenly became alert. Just as he was about to destroy it, Jian Wushuang attacked before him. At this moment, 36,000 sword intents blasted out along with his palm. As the distance was too close, the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal could not dodge at all. All of the sword intent was absorbed by him. Clang! The incomparably clear sword intent sent him flying. The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal was like a kite with a broken string, falling headfirst into the void. Jian Wushuang couldn't hold on any longer. His figure was like a flash of lightning as he fell into the void. The old man, who had barely managed to stand straight on the ground, raised his head and saw this scene. His entire body instantly trembled. Then, he pounced forward and caught Jian Wushuang, who was falling. Looking at him, who was covered in divine blood and heavily injured, the old man gritted his teeth and placed him behind his back. "Don't go! Put him down!" A furious roar resounded as the remaining 3 black-robed Grand Yen Immortals chased after him. The old man did not stay any longer. He carried Jian Wushuang and fled frantically. As a Grand Yen Immortal, his speed was extremely fast. Clearly, he had escaped quite a few times before. However, the shattered land still restricted his movements. The old man seemed to be extremely afraid of the black water and kept flying to avoid it. "Old shepherd, you're courting death." The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal was furious to the extreme as he stretched out his hand and unleashed an unparalleled divine punishment. Caught off guard, the old man was sent flying, and his entire body fell into the black water. Jian Wushuang cried out in pain and then fainted. The old man desperately wanted to escape from the black water, but under the black water, a pair of hands quietly grabbed his legs and pulled him into the water. "Save! Ugh!" After a few bubbles appeared on the black water, everything disappeared without a trace. The 3 black-robed Grand Yen Immortals chased over. When they saw that there was no trace of them, they could not help but fly into a rage. The black-robed Grand Yen Immortal, who was almost sliced into a bloody gourd by the 36,000 sword intents, was extremely furious. "Find him! Dig him out even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground." Arg! Gargle! Once he fell into the black water, it was as if all the yen power had disappeared. The elder who was carrying Jian Wushuang struggled under the black water but could not rise at all. Jian Wushuang, who had fainted, was also in a terrible state. He frowned as if he could die at any time. If one looked carefully, they would discover that, in the extremely dark water, the one holding the old man's legs was a slender figure. The figure seemed to be unafraid of the black water as it swam around like a water ghost. He dragged the old man's leg with his slender arm and swam to the bottom of the sea. The depths of the endless sea was like a boundless black crystal, emitting an indescribable beauty and mystery. Just as the old man felt that he was about to die, the figure that was holding him down suddenly threw him. After a moment of dizziness, the old man was thrown onto a piece of land. He was thrown into a daze. At the same time, an extremely pure energy entered his meridians and nourished them. The old man's fragile divine thought was repaired. He propped himself up and sat up unsteadily. What is this place? Everything in front of him was like some kind of magical karst cave. All kinds of crystals condensed from the purest energy crystals were emitting magnificent light. At this moment, the slender figure that had been standing outside the cave entrance walked into the cave. The old man immediately went into a state of alert. "Don't worry, I don't want to do anything to you." If I wanted to, you would have disappeared into the sea long ago. The figure's voice was lazy and low, as if he had just woken up from a dream. The cave was slightly lit, allowing the old man to barely see him clearly. The figure had long arms and legs, and his body was well proportioned. Although his face was not considered handsome, he was free and unrestrained. On his naked chest were some mysterious flowing clouds and water patterns, carrying the desolate aura of the ancient era. He came before the old man and slowly squatted down. He looked at Jian Wushuang, who was lying on the ground, and no one knew if he was dead or alive. Then he looked at the old man and said playfully, "You want to carry him to that person to exchange for merits?" The old man's body trembled without a trace. Then, he said with some embarrassment and anger, "Stop bullshitting. Which eye of yours saw that I was going to do this?" He smiled and did not care about the old man's insults. Instead, he pointed at Jian Wushuang and said leisurely, "I watched the battle from beginning to end. He was very scary and powerful. He easily killed the group of law enforcement officers until only 3 were left. But he's already unconscious. If we bring him to that person now, I think the merit will accumulate will be enough to give us all freedom." "What do you mean?" The old man looked at him nervously and asked. The long-legged young man then said, "The meaning is very simple. Bring him to that person and accumulate merit. Will you do it?" When the old man heard this, he was not in a hurry to speak. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, "I can't make a decision. He didn't kill me." Hearing this, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "That's a good answer. If you had agreed with me just now, you would be a corpse now." The old man was startled and his face turned cold. "What do you mean?" "Nothing much. We're going to leave this place soon." The long-legged young man shrugged and said, "We'll leave when he gets better." Jian Wushuang felt a sharp pain in his head, as if it would explode at any time. His divine thought, which had already reached perfection, was already in chaos. The undying and imperishable immortal body had already recovered, and the black-robed Grand Yen Immortal's damage to Jian Wushuang was not fatal. What was truly fatal was Jian Wushuang's overdraft. The slaughter Dao was too overbearing, and the consumption of his yen power was extremely terrifying. However, Jian Wushuang had been consuming emperor-grade pills to ensure the supply of slaughter Dao, which caused his meridians to be exhausted. Although he was recovering, the overdraft of his divine thoughts still made Jian Wushuang feel extremely painful. His temples were covered in sweat, and even the yen power in his immortal body was flowing uncontrollably. This terrifying feeling lasted for a long time. When he felt better, he immediately opened his eyes. As far as the eye could see, it was a cave that contained profound mysteries. There was also an unfamiliar face looking at him with a smile. When Jian Wushuang woke up, the long-legged young man smiled and said, "Congratulations on getting out of danger. You can call me Bian Ziyuan." Bian Ziyuan, it's a rather unique name. Jian Wushuang's head was dizzy, but he still remembered this unique and catchy name.